We are back, folks, from an unscheduled break, an unscheduled detour. Here we are, back with Natural AF. I'm your host, Isaac.
And I'm Alexa.
So, if you've missed us, where have we been? What's been going on?
It's been a minute, guys. A lot has happened. A lot has been happening behind the scenes. Life has been lifing. And it just seems that we've met one roadblock after another. And we've just had to roll with the punches. But here we are. It's been it's actually quite the story, because a couple of weeks ago we were in Yamba. We were cat sitting for our friends. There was no Wi-Fi there. So we did our best. We took everything to record and we did our best to set it all up, and just nothing was working. We couldn't get anything to load. So we're like, all right, forget it. We'll just, we'll put it. I couldn't even get on Substack, because then the Substack sign-in requirements have changed and they want biometric data. And I was like, I'm not doing that.
I wouldn't say we spiraled, but there's this moment where I was like,
we did a little bit.
Are we going to have to just stop all this stuff because Australia passed a retarded law about if you have to have biometric data to prove that you're over 16?
Yeah.
I did see this, though. I don't know if I could have this play while we're doing this. That would be amazing. So basically, there's a video of kids. I'm talking 14, 15, 16-year-olds. They're not supposed to be on the internet, basically, on any apps or whatever the hell the law says. They're not supposed to be on the internet for this is the first week. They show up at a shopping center somewhere, full Viking, no shirts, just walking in as a horde. It looked like an Aldi or something. And they just stormed into it, ransacked the place. They literally just became a mob of Vikings raiding and pillaging. And
does this have anything to do with that?
With the
not
law?
Being able
That's their protest.
Oh.
They're like, you want to treat us like a bunch of, children? Well, we're just going to act like Vikings and take over. I don't know. I thought it was inspirational. Everyone's like, oh, can you believe it? Can you believe this generation of these? I'm like, there's hope. There's a sliver of silver on that cloudy day when the kids become Vikings and they reclaim their manhood. This is like a rite of passage for them, honestly. This is their Boston Tea Party. Congratulations, Australia.
I had no knowledge of this, but we digress. Anyway, so long story short, we couldn't even notify. Isaac was out working a lot that week, so I was kind of left to try and do what I could, and nothing was working. I had even more troubles with getting online, and couldn't get onto Substack to let you guys know. We're like, it's fine. We'll just put it out the next week. We'll let everyone know. And then last week we recorded the intro. We did all the things that we had to do, and Isaac went to put it all together to put it out. And the mics weren't working. The mics hadn't been connected correctly, and there was no audio on everything that we recorded.
Yep.
So that happened.
So and after I got my 30 lashings for that, we just kept rolling. Then the week went zip.
Yeah.
And then it's...
Yeah. I mean, we're leading up to Christmas. It's such a crazy time of year. I think everyone can relate to that. So just on top of everything, we were just
we were supposed to be off this week.
Yeah, by this week, guys, announcement, spoiler alert, we actually did announce this in the previous recording, but we were meant to be finished by this week. We were going to take off Christmas, New Year, and then all of January, come back February. So that's our big announcement. But now we're going to have episodes released this week and next week.
God willing. Inshallah.
Knock on wood, touch wood. And then as of January, as the listener, we will have all of January off, and we will be back in February. Refreshed, rejuvenated. We're going to freshen up the show a little bit. We've got a lot of ideas in the works and things happening, and I'm super excited.
Yep. And on that Februarian return, that's a pronunciation nobody asked for. In that month, we're going to be, between now and then, we're going to be brainstorming and workshopping some upgrades to the show and some ideas. If you have any ideas, things that maybe formats for shows that would make this more interesting, not as long. Maybe we'll break it up a bit, have interviews here.
Or just what you want to see more of. Do you want more roundtables? Do you want more interviews?
Do you want more dumb social media videos that I found uniquely inspiring?
Yeah. I think we might put out a poll. We'll figure out the best way to do that for our listeners, but it'd be good to put out a poll, because I think that everything that we're thinking of doing and how we're slightly going to change things up, I think everyone is going to love it, but we would love to hear people's feedback. Are you getting ready to dab me?
You're glistening.
Guys, we are literally in the middle of a heat wave right now and we can't record with the fans on. We don't have aircon in this little space that we live in. And it is really freaking hot.
It's
so
humid. It's not that bad, honestly.
No, it's really humid. I've been home all day and it is so humid here. Like I've just been sweating sitting in one place. Like it's ridiculously hot.
We don't do air conditioning.
Yeah, we are in the peak of a heat wave. So give it a couple of days, we'll be back to normal. Anyway, we digress again. Let's make this quick so that we don't end up a pile of sweat in a puddle.
Right. So in this episode, we have my friend Chance Garton, and Alexa loved his interview last time I did this, which was years ago at this point. And now that she's on the show, she's like, we have to interview him together.
Yeah.
So
totally.
we invited him on, and this one kind of, it was a few weeks ago when we recorded it, right? Like a month.
Oh, I think over a month ago now we recorded
sorry,
it.
Chances. Yeah, and it was a funny one. Like you'll see in the episode, we kind of disagree on some stuff. And
Chance was a little bit naughty. He talked over Isaac a lot, which we did like. It wasn't too bad.
I did find it a little bit annoying, but thinking about it now, I'm just like, I don't care. I just want to get this episode out and like you can enjoy it because you're still going to gain some really good insights from it.
Absolutely. And the only reason that it did annoy me a little bit in the sense that I wanted you to finish what you were saying because like it was around, the topic of the Bible and the stories and Jesus and all of this. Now, I don't know that stuff. Anyone that listens to this show knows that's like not my area of expertise at all. Mm-hmm. But Isaac knows that stuff really well. And Chance has studied a lot of things in that realm as well and has a very different perspective. And so I would have loved to have heard exactly what you wanted to say so that then he could also then give his perspective. Yeah. And we just kind of missed your side of it. I would have loved to have gotten into that a bit more.
For something like this is what I want to say about that for the new year. Things like this, that topic, we didn't actually plan to go into. It just kind of just flowed into it.
Yeah.
And something like that, we actually it would be good to bring Chance on to actually go into it, but prepare for it. Yeah. And he did mention that while he was talking about this stuff, because it's he, off the top of his head, he's remembering some of the linguistic things that he's really big into etymology, and he has a really unique perspective on etymology, and he goes deep into it, a lot deeper than most people do. So it is interesting. But to really get where we're both coming from, it would have to be some kind of more prepared, actually have like little segments of text to break into and really get into the meaning of it. But the reason why it's so important is like our last episode with Cal Washington. That one was super important. It's don't throw the Bible out with the bathwater. And that's kind of what I was getting at with some of this the back and forth with that. But it really doesn't matter all that much. Like, if you really have faith in Jesus and you believe in the Bible and you believe all this stuff, you're not going to be shaken by people questioning it and all this other stuff. It's just going to make you aware of kind of maybe some of the breaks in the narrative or some of the other possibilities or things out there that challenge your beliefs. And if you have a curiosity about it, you go into it and you see, is that true? Is there something to this?
Yeah.
What is he actually saying? And then decide for yourself.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you have to go with whatever resonates as truth for you. And I feel like I'm really on that path now with that because I do not come from a religious background, as we all know. And I think that for me is why I'm so open to hearing different perspectives, because then I just like to kind of sit with it and like feel into, well, how does that feel for me? And that's always changing. So, and it was super interesting to get into after we had Cal, because that was probably one of our best episodes for sure. We got so much great feedback. So I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you haven't listened to it, go back. This is our previous episode. And also, if you haven't listened to Chance's previous episode with Isaac, it was, quite a few years ago. But if you head to our link tree, the links in the show notes, and you can find those archived episodes. You can listen to them on Spotify, or you can find them on Odyssey if you want to watch the interview. And it was an awesome interview. And it's funny because I think it was one of your longest ones that you did, and it's definitely one of our longest ones that we've done with Chance together. And we talked about a bunch of different stuff. We did biofield tuning, things about the body and that kind of thing. And we just Chance is such a wealth of knowledge, so it was a lot of fun to talk about lots of different things.
All right. Well, before we get into the episode, this is an independent show. We're never going to have ads for gambling unless it's on Rumble. I don't control what Rumble puts in front of in the thing, but we don't run ads. It's sponsored by us and our energy and our bright personalities, and Natural Art Form, which is a business that Alex and I run, and I create formulations and solve certain problems for certain people, have a certain set of skills, if I might say. But we both got really sunburnt when we were in Yamba recently, out on the beach.
And we were at another Christmas gathering yesterday. We were out in the sun for quite a while, and Regenerate has been an absolute godsend. I actually just looked today. The only place that I've only just over a week later have started to peel a little bit was this little patch on my tummy that got the most burnt. And it's taken a week to even, it's the tiniest bit of peeling because I've literally been using Regenerate on it like every day, multiple times a day. And everywhere else went tan. This is the only part that stayed red. But it's so soothing and hydrating and so amazing for this time of year here in Australia.
Honestly, those burns that we got, without Regenerate, I think they probably would have definitely been blistered. Like, you know, you get like 2nd-degree burns. It was like a 2nd-degree burn.
Potentially. It was pretty bad.
It was really bad. So, but that comes from a background as an Army medic. I think a little bit differently about things. I put together DMSO with aloe, inspired by Amanda Vollmer. And then I just expanded that recipe into more of a cream, a lotion that I added comp-free calendula to, and then titrated down the DMSO dose so you don't have fish breath. That's I don't really get that too much, but some people that use heavy DMSO use. I do get questions at the markets every now and then though, like, does your product cause fish breath? Because if you take straight DMSO, Alexa's smelled it, or garlic breath, or however you would describe it.
Yeah, it's a sulfur compound. So I think sulfury, that kind of smell.
Yeah. So
I've never experienced
we get questions about that,
though.
but I just want to set the record straight. With our products, I've titrated down the dosage of DMSO so that it's still maximally effective without having that.
No, I'm pretty sensitive to DMSO, and I can taste it in my mouth sometimes, but you don't say, oh, you've got bad breath.
No.
Like, no.
So yeah, these are good formulations and they're clean because we don't hate you. Like a lot of the other companies, I'm not claiming anything, but they put chemical ingredients in it that it's at this point, it's unnecessary. We've got natural alternatives to it. Mm-hmm. We're not Cosmos certified or anything, but we're doing things at that level or beyond. So organic formulations as locally grown and locally produced as possible.
So I actually want to take this opportunity. It's, great time of the year to reflect on the year that's been and, just really be grateful. And especially in these last couple of months, it has been so amazing for any of our listeners who are also natural art form customers, who a lot of you are. I just want to thank you so, so, so much. The online orders these last couple of months, we have actually been so blown away because Isaac's only just started. And when I say just started, like I don't even know if we're getting any customers through the paid ads, but we haven't done any paid advertising up until this point. And all of the orders we get in Australia are through word of mouth. We are up on like the Way Forward, and there are certain other communities that people know of us through those. But it's just phenomenal the way that it's now growing and word has spread. And it really is all thanks to you guys. One, for not only buying the products, and now we have repeat customers that have bought, one guy just ordered 3 bundles and this is the 3rd time he's ordered from us. So Thank you. Don't know names, but thank you so much. And yeah, it's all thanks to you guys, like spreading the word and telling people how much of, the products are doing for you and how great they are. So I just want to thank you and, from both of us, because it means the absolute world to us.
Yeah. Y'all came in at like a bunch of champions, just a herd of champions helping us out. Really appreciate you. And Alexa mentioned it. So the Way Forward. So if you're a member on Alex Zek's community, the Way Forward, you actually can get 20% off. So if you're there, go to their marketplace, look us up.
And of course, if you're just listening to the show and you're not part of the Way Forward, you always get 10% off any order, no matter how many times you order, using code NaturalAF10 at naturalartform.com. And when you're on the website, if you haven't joined our mailing list already, be sure to do that, because that is always the first place we send all of our specials, updates, new products, anything we've got going on, that'll go out to our mailing list first and foremost. You'll receive our monthly newsletter, and next year we are definitely looking to keep in contact a lot more through our emails. And we've got a lot of exciting things planned. I'm not gonna say any more than that, but there's a lot coming for next year.
Right. Well, we hope you enjoy the episode. Let us know how it goes. Let us know what you think about the conversation.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas.
Hope you enjoy the time with your family. I know that we will be. It'll be a really nice break, and we'll see you again next week when we drop our last episode for 2025.
Let's go.
Garton is the host of InnerVerse, a podcast dedicated to prying open your third ear and showing you the reality of perpetual synchronicity. With 8 years of experience in podcasting, Chance has developed an effortless ability to maintain a positive vibe in conversational flow states. His consistent efforts at researching language, symbolism, and mythology fill his conversations with fresh insights, and his knowledge in a wide variety of subjects allows him to see connections that others miss. Chance is also a biofield tuner and seasoned energy worker and divination specialist, having helped hundreds of people around the world heal and align their mind and body.
All right, we've got an amazing guest back on the show for the second time. Chance Garton in the house. Good to see you, buddy.
Welcome.
Wow. What's up, Isaac? It's been too long, man. And it's great to meet you, Alexa.
So good to finally meet you, Chance.
Yeah, Isaac, it feels like it's been, like I said, far too long. I've known you for quite a while at this point.
Yeah. I still tell people at the markets when we're doing our thing with Natural Art Form, talking about the shoulder injury that I had. And I just remember back in the time at Bear Fest, I was sharing a bit of that with you. You actually stopped by the little market stall that I had at Bear Fest, and right away you keyed in on some really important things with my left shoulder and the emotional stuff, relational stuff that I was dealing with at the time. And that's kind of how we met. And it was very accurate and very interesting. And we started talking, biofield tuning at some point. I don't know. It just kind of carried on from there. But
the old left shoulder of empath being hurt by psychic vampire.
Yeah.
I mean, not to say anyone's literally a psychic vampire, but that's the storyline that tends to live there. But it's not always like that. It's the left shoulder of taking on negative energy from other people or the world, and being too porous or vulnerable to it. I know, because that was I had the left shoulder injury that caused me to investigate tuning when nothing else was working to heal it.
Nice.
There you go.
We're going to get into that.
Oh, we're definitely going to get into that. I can't wait. But before we get there, I'd love for our audience, because we do have a lot of new listeners from when Isaac first started. So for anyone that doesn't know you, we'd love to hear a bit of your own personal journey and sort of, I guess, what the major sort of, rites of passage were for you to lead you to where you are today and the work that you do.
Oh yeah. Thank you. I'll try to just stick to the main beats. Because, man, it was so long ago, but 10 years ago, I started InnerVerse podcast. And now that has become, rather than just a show, it's kind of like an umbrella channel where I've got multiple podcasts over the history of, my work. And right now I'm doing only 3 different ones. At certain points I had maybe up to 4. And I just do the one that I feel like doing next. Right now I've got the main show, InnerVerse. It's been a year of quality over quantity as I became a father a year ago, and the ability to live stream weekly became a little different for me. It just wasn't as attractive as, spending time being helpful or having fun with the baby. And I'm happy with that decision. And right now my show usually comes out about once a month for the main show. And then those are kind of a higher quality production, a lot more creativity and personal art put into the shows than I was doing before. So that's part of why they don't come out as often. But on a weekly basis, or been attempting to do it weekly, I think I finally hit my stride and I'm really doing it weekly. I have a members only show called Inner Circle, where I share stuff that doesn't make it into a more interview style podcast. And I just talk by myself for about an hour or so to the supporting audience on Substack and Patreon and all that. And I've really enjoyed doing that, because having less content frequency, you start to maybe feel a little rusty behind the mic, and having this weekly outlet where I'm just practicing the flow state of speech and also thinking about stuff that I've learned in that week, it becomes its own helpful exercise. And I think a lot of good information is getting put into that didn't have an outlet before. Like this week I did a show about some of the tunings that had come up in that week for clients, specifically focusing on, and one thing I've learned a lot about, Isaac, since I did any sessions for you, is herbalism and how plants really synergize with the tuning process. Now, typically kind of divine, if you will, like divination, a plant that will be the guiding teacher or spirit, if you will, for a session with a client. And then as the session unfolds, it becomes more and more clear to me why that plant was the one that wanted to help. But also it teaches me stuff about what that plant actually is here to help for, besides just the textbook. It's a remedy for digestion problems or et cetera, et cetera. It gives me a much broader, almost personal relationship with a plant by seeing a human being and the full dynamic spread of complications that a human being can express, that one particular plant is the perfect teacher or spirit or guide for that person. So then they also will hopefully take that on as a prescription for a while to help them integrate the lessons in the tuning. But like, for example, this week I talked about what I realized when I started talking was like, oh, the plants that came up this week, they're all like smudgeable. They all have this sort of dynamic of being used in incense and smudge. And it was yarrow and Palo Santo, of course. And then the third one was dragon's blood, which is more of a resin for incense. But as I explored how they showed up, what I learned about those particular plant teachers and healers, I realized that there was a very cool alchemy between the three, where if you considered the magnum opus or the 4 steps of the great work, Negredo or the blackening being like the trauma itself, or the disconnection or the dissonance in one's energy field, that's the first stage. And then the second stage of the whitening being very relatable to yarrow, and the, going on into the yellowing being very relatable to Palo Santo, and dragon's blood being perfect for the reddening. And that was a very cool exploration, and it allows me in those kind of solo podcasts to reflect and realize that there is a tighter web of synchronicity that interconnects the seemingly disconnected events in our life on a weekly basis, on a day-to-day basis. And it's really cool. So, if people are curious to hear about the alchemical magnum opus between those 3 incense type plants and how
Definitely
they showed
go back
up in
and check
tunings,
out
pretty cool.
that. And I think by the time I was moving over here, you were in the middle of doing a series. I can't remember who was involved with it, but they were going over the astrological links to different plants, and you were doing this whole series of things.
That.
So yeah,
That was really valuable. Yeah. So, I'll try to return to the question of like my journey and whatnot, but that is a series that is exemplary of how in the years of the podcast on my channel, really the content is not typically like dated in any way. And you could go back years in the archive and find something that was extremely important, resonant, chock full of wisdom. And that series was, we called it astro-herbalism. And that was my first exposure really to learning about herbalism on a mystical level. So I was like a total novice at that point. And, I still consider myself quite a beginner in plants, but going back and listening to clips or segments from that series where we actually did about 15, and we covered essentially one zodiac sign and how at a time, and how several different plants are archetypally, you can derive aspects of their quality and their virtue through their relationship to the archetype of that zodiac sign, and why in the doctrine of signature sense, like how they look, how they smell, what they do throughout the course of the seasons, you can make the relationship between those two. Like, for example, yarrow, which is Achilles millefolium, named after Achilles, because in the mythology, Achilles, in one of the versions of the story, he's dipped in the river Styx, held up by his heel. And that was why he was vulnerable at the heels, because that was the only part that didn't go in the water. But in another version, he was actually dipped in yarrow tea. And in some of the legends, he's even lamenting for not having yarrow when he gets wounded, and he uses yarrow to heal his men. So yarrow is like an incredible wound healer and sealer. It's like a boundary medicine. Funny. It grows on like roadways. It grows in like the border and fence lines between this and that. So of course, it's something for your skin is the primary boundary of your body. It will help close a wound, help stop bleeding, and it's wound medicine. but also on the feminine side, like it's a very Saturnian in a masculine sense because of the strong, upright, very rigid stalks. And then it's a feminine plant for its Venusian, beautiful, all these tiny white leaves. And you have this very cool dichotomy of the male and the female. And then the Venusian aspect of it is that, you know, women aren't typically getting cut with swords and bleeding out on a battlefield, right? But their wound that yarrow is really good for healing is womb damage. So after pregnancy, after giving birth, after miscarriage, or other kinds of, you know, menstruation blood problems that can go on, excess bleeding, things of that nature. So it has this cool, you know, even in the word, it almost sounds similar. It's like womb and wound. It heals. It's a healer for both. And I think that's pretty cool. That's what the millefolium means, 1,000 leaves. It's talking about all the tiny little white flower petals that bud off of it. But then the leaves itself have this serrated, like razor edge, which in the doctrine of signatures would tell you, it's like, this is good for if you get cut by something sharp. Like it has that sharp edge.
It's so interesting, the correlation to the astrological signs, because my mum's actually studying homeopathy at the moment and they've just learnt about tissue salts. And she was just telling us the other day that there's 12 tissue salts. They all correlate to an astrological sign. And apparently she was saying that everyone's deficient in 3 tissue salts because we gestate for 9 months. And so that leaves out 3, like you generally will be, well, that's the idea, is that you'll be deficient in those 3 salts or 3 signs, astrological signs, that you weren't like in the womb for. So that, I just find that fascinating.
Yeah. And another thing,
there's the zodiac framework applies to so much. And I'm going to ask you guys, what do you think Achilles millefolium might relate to in the doctrine of signatures of the 12 signs of the zodiac?
I have no idea.
I know there's a planet for the wounded healer, but when I thought wounded healer and like with the because the heal.
Well, yeah, Chiron,
and
the
wounds.
asteroid, right? But Chiron, who's even in the mythology, who teaches Achilles to use yarrow, which is cool.
Wow. Yeah, but that's
well in our series. It may be.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, we put it with Aquarius in our series because Aquarius rules the ankles, which is like where the heel is at.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, fun fact, I've actually got a tattoo of Achilles on my right leg, and his Achilles is on my Achilles. And also, when I moved to Australia, there was something in that, man. I got that in jump school in the Army, but when I moved to Australia, I was growing... My mind just had a flash.
Yarrow?
Yeah, I was growing yarrow in Wyoming, and I dried it, that and calendula, but I brought a jar of yarrow with me. I don't know why. I was just like, I grew this. I'm going to bring that, and then it stayed on our shelf for a couple years, and then just recently I did a tallow extract with the yarrow. I was like, I want to make something with this tallow, but I want to do an herbal extract in the tallow, put it into a topical remedy, but. Something about the yarrow's calling to me, brother.
Yeah, man. It's another thing that yarrow I think is good for is think about the warrior tendency to bleed for others, right? And when we were talking about the beginning, your left shoulder injury and how in the biofield that is representative of someone that's taken on negative energy from other people. A lot of the time it's like, I'm trying to help a lost cause or something like that. I'm trying to do too much. I'm taking on the toxin or the poison of somebody else that isn't really mine. And I feel this like responsibility. For me, whenever I had this injury, it was more like what dawned on me was that I kept putting myself in those situations and relationships so I could have a project that was why I stalled out and didn't do I didn't do my, things that would actually matter and help me in my life. And so as an interesting example, using yarrow as a plant that would have been really helpful for me at that time, and maybe part of why you were drawn to it, because you have even an Achilles tattoo right in that spot, is the ankles in the biofield are the left ankle is your ability to detach from causes of stress, anxiety, and fear. And so when there's an ankle or heel problem, we are attached to some stressor in an unhealthy way. And in the back of the ankle, even more specifically, is like we don't know what it is we're attached to. We just feel it nebulously. Now, the right ankle has this quality of being representative of our decisiveness, more in the general sense, but then also procrastination. You know, like if we are a perfectionist or a procrastinator, the right ankle will usually have some kind of recurrence of injury or discomfort, or at the very least, a subtle stuck energy to it. And I call it perfectioninism or procrastination.
That's me.
A lot of times those things go together, where you spend your time perfecting details that are unimportant and don't matter, and not actually putting any attention. You're procrastinating the steps that would matter a lot to you. So
Guilty.
looking at those, yeah, I mean, we all can probably relate to that, right? So looking at those two things together, this like left shoulder and the ankles, like this taking on other people's toxicity for them. Well, what filters the toxicity in the body is primarily the liver is the biggest organ for that. And so whenever we're in those positions of taking on other people's stuff for them, you know, pushing down our own feelings and our own needs to be there in a way that's unhealthy for us, right? But thinking we're helping, or, you know, in my case, it was like procrastinating, doing my own thing that I should be doing. Well, we probably are repressing anger in that type of dynamic quite a lot, right? Which means there's going to be damage or dis-ease, or at the very least, some dysfunction going on in the liver. The liver is going to get backed up because the liver is the organ that governs the emotion of anger as well. So looking at those things in context with each other, it's like, well, the warrior, he may bleed for others. And the warrior is often like archetypally connected with anger and like rage and stuff like that. And then on the other hand, you have the Achilles archetype coming back to the heel or the ankle. So the warrior has to be decisive. And as soon as he's not decisive, as soon as he strikes his blow in the wrong place, you know, like with the idea of perfectionism and procrastination, or he's too slow, you know, procrastinates doing what he's got to do. He did. You know, so like yarrow is this really interesting medicine that I can see how in this one plant, it's not just teaching us one of these lessons, but it's showing us a particular masculine dynamic that we can fall into, like you could call it Achilles syndrome, where it's, you know, showing up in the body, in the ankles, in the left shoulder, in the liver. And that's the kind of like big picture epiphanies that bringing plants into biofield tuning with the knowledge of the biofield anatomy and how different emotional states and beliefs work throughout different parts of the body. And it's just like, wow, I'm starting to get plants in a way that I never was really getting before when I was attempting to just learn about them by reading the book and, you know, this is good for that. And here's the things to memorize. Getting this type of relationship with them, I'm seeing them as like almost like a person, you know, like a yarrow really is Achilles, at least in its male sense.
Wow.
Well, we spoke about that recently on a podcast. I can't remember who with, but we were talking about how all living things have their own consciousness and they have their own unique sort of imprint. And that's absolutely true for plants. And we quite often, I think that's, we would maybe talking about it in the context of plant medicine. And so each, you know, people are very familiar with ayahuasca or peyote or those kinds of things. And they will all give you different experiences because they carry their own sort of own energy. And so I love bringing that into, you know, just like these herbal, like these everyday plants that we have access to, because, you know, and I'm sure we'll get into this a lot more in terms of like with the biofield tuning, but as we know now that everything physical is preceded by the metaphysical. And I think there's no difference when it comes to plants and nature.
Yeah, everything physical is preceded by the metaphysical. You know, that's actually the main lesson of the idea of quality over quantity is that in the materialist vibe, it's like they believe that the physical matter, the quantity of particles and the quantity of, you know, molecular arrangement in a very numerical sense, because they're like counting protons and neutrons and electrons allegedly. That quantity particleization quantity is what generates qualities. So like those exact, one proton, one neutron, one electron, hydrogen. And then you go down the line of the periodic table. So it's literally like numbers are creating the quality that they're calling elements in the periodic table. That's actually totally backwards.
Yeah.
The quality, which is a metaphysical concept, is what condenses down into a material form. And, that's like a language way of saying it, but maybe not in a literal sense per se, but it's, quality is where quantity emerges out of, or the physical emerges out of essence, right?
Yeah.
So instead of trying to like break things down to their constituent parts to figure out how, because that's the problem with allopathy, right? That's the problem even with a lot of modern herbalism. It just becomes green allopathy. They're like, yeah, take this because, the active ingredient in Palo Santo is limonene, which is in oranges and citrus fruit. So that's why it makes you feel happy, because everyone just likes that chemical. Is like that chemical makes you happy. We've figured out the active ingredient that creates this effect. But, good luck. Like, extract that one chemical out and,
all we just
burn
need
it
is some
or
acetone
whatever. And that is not the same as
gasoline.
burning a stick of real Palo Santo that was harvested mindfully from an already fallen tree, treated as a sacred living being reverently. You can tell the difference between Palo that was like cut down or grown and then harvested in that way versus wild harvested in the traditional like native way where they don't touch the tree unless they get permission from a tree that was already down to harvest for Palo. It's a different vibe. So, where does that come from? That's not the limonene chemical.
Yeah, exactly.
So did you do the allopathic route? Did you try all that when you had your shoulder injury before? Like, what actually led you to switching gears and going into biofield tuning or learning about that?
Well, I didn't try, like I didn't go to the doctor or nothing. I was not a doctor believer, but I was in limbo. I knew that I had experience. Okay, so backing up a little bit, I started off in typical Midwestern, white Anglo-Saxon, Protestant upbringing, yada, yada, went to high school, went to university because you're supposed to, and kind of felt very aimless and purposeless in that point. And when I hit the graduation of university, where I got an English degree in creative writing, which was just so that I could do something to get a degree, not because I had any intention to pursue that. It was really the lowest point of my life in a lot of ways, because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know where I was going. And so when I moved back to my hometown and started working at my parents' company, just as like a sort of an assistant position to the administration department, because it's like here's a job for you, do something, right? And I moved back in with my parents. It was at first, that was like bottoming out in a way to me, because it was where I finally had to face that what I had been doing since becoming a young adult was just to please the people that I thought I needed to please. And I never actually had any intention or direction with it. Then I got drawn through some friends into the world of going to music festivals, discovered some, psilocybin experiences, MDMA experiences. I wasn't like a heavy drug user in any sense, but there were a couple of years there where I was trying out those things, and, everyone around me is doing it recreationally, and I had no capacity for it as a recreational tool. Like it was all like every time I did it, I was like, okay, what's the next giant epiphany, life-changing discovery about how the universe works? Basically, long story short, that first year, really that first summer of opening up to the psychedelic experience, I had this weird, almost like time travel type moment. Not a moment, it was like an extended period of time where temporarily I don't know how else to describe it, so bear with me that this is, figurative language in a way, but this is what it felt like. My future self was inhabiting my younger body from that time. And there was a solid 6 months where I just knew stuff that I had no business knowing about, like metaphysical dynamics. I could do quite proficiently like energy healing just through my hands and through touch. I could cure people's headaches. I could cure their nausea. I could bring them back out of a K-hole. You know, I knew stuff that I shouldn't know. I had like psychic premonitions constantly. Like it was wild stuff.
Wow.
And it, like I it was really weird because I up to that point was like you know, raised Christian and then became an atheist after discovering that the religion thing was deceiving me in certain respects. And so I was super directionless, and that's probably part of the low point is you know, the loss of a spiritual path. But anyway, through these experiences opening up to energy, many wild synchronicities led me to stuff like qigong and you know, crystals and all kinds of stuff that started opening up my sensitivity further. But at a certain point, I had to stop with the psychedelics because it was getting too real. Like, you know, I couldn't take mushrooms because as soon as I did, I was aware of all of the non-living people that were around us all the time, and they wanted my attention. And I was like, I'm not ready for you. Wow. This is freaky. Was all the other people around me are like, "Ooh, we're tripping, we're having fun," and I'm like, I see dead people. Wow. And, so I had to stop.
Way to kill the buzz chance.
Well, I wasn't telling them. I was just sitting there like, it's okay.
Bro, I would have shit myself. I would have seriously shit myself.
You know the ghost in Super Mario where if you're looking at them, they stop, but if you look away, they come at you. That's how they were for me, but in reverse. Like if I looked at them, they would just come right at me and want my attention. So I had to like, I'm not looking at you. I don't even notice you. Wow. I've later had like mediumship experiences non-psychedelically, and they're much more manageable where it's I choose it. And anyway, and those are cool because you can literally get information that's verifiably true that you have no business knowing. And that's pretty cool. It lets you know that everything that ever was continues to be, you know, everybody that ever was continues to be. But essentially what I realized in my path at that point in my early 20s was like, once the afterglow sort of wore off, I now had a vision of who I was. And that was, I was some kind of healer, some kind of, you know, without wanting to label myself in a pretentious way, there was some kind of shamanic element to my awakening. That was the only way I could frame it through what I was aware of. And so then it became a quest of like, well, how do I get back to that point of like elevated consciousness and almost superpowers, but through a natural life path and the accumulation of skills and knowledge and self-work and discipline. And, you know, that was it. That was what I started working on. And I was like pretty early into that process, a little ways into that process when I started InnerVerse, the podcast. And, you know, who knows, there's a spectrum of a process, but at this point, I wouldn't say the process is complete, but a lot of the abilities that I had in that temporary samadhi summer, I would say I've got a better abilities now in a much more sort of controlled and disciplined way that has a proper container and a place to be applied. And I'm really grateful for that. And then like to get to where biofield tuning comes in, hurt my shoulder. It had to do with my tendency to, and at the time it was my first marriage, where I was creating this story of she's the mean bad guy, I'm the nice guy who's just trying to help her get her life together at my own sacrifice. Poor me. Right. She's being so mean to me, you know, and all I'm doing is trying to help her. Why won't you just get it together? You know, having no idea. Then that was like almost the last boss battle in a way that I just needed at that time, the story of good guys and bad guys and blame to help me cope with the addiction I had to stalling in the major, you know, really is a fear I had of, well, what if I go for it and fail? You know, what if I try to be who I'm supposed to be and it doesn't work out? So the left shoulder injury was really a manifestation of that, a message from my body about how this has got to stop. We're done with this. It's over. So I tried everything. I thought it was rock climbing that had hurt my shoulder. Stopped climbing for a week, stopped climbing for a month. 3 months later, still hadn't gotten better, you know, coming in and going from the wall, but sometimes taking several weeks off because I really wanted to climb again. And I hear Eileen McCusick on a podcast one day, and it just rings a lot of bells for me. And I get her tuning fork because I hear her a second time on another show I like. So I'm like, okay, something is really resonating about this. It sounds deeply true. It sounds like this actually might be something I need to know about. I ordered her book. I got her sonic slider fork, put it on my shoulder. Immediately, the pain of the injury was better that day.
Wow.
Within a couple of days, I had full range of motion back. I mean, like, the injury was such that I couldn't raise my left arm over my head. And within a week, I could get back to full strength workouts with the shoulder. It was like, I was like, okay, there was something about that injury that was not physical in a sense, because it shouldn't have been all better that fast. You know, and then little did I know, as I'd be separated from my first wife, and then not that long after it was like fully over, because I dealt with the physical aspect of the issue. The external aspect of the issue was going to follow. Right? And I learned the lessons about what it meant as I was going by studying the biofield anatomy, and eventually, you know, it clicked like, oh, this is why that happened, which really helped me deal with the, you know, the other side of left shoulder, you know, the heart chakra, if you will. The front end of it is the repression of grief and sadness. So, you know, what I had to go through on the resolution of that injury was I had to, you know, through the external circumstance of that relationship ending, I had to go through a lot of grief and sadness. And I'll just say, we're both better off. There was nothing wrong with her at all. She was not the bad guy that I had made her in my mind. And she didn't deserve to be in that dynamic any more than I belonged in that dynamic. And, you know, grateful for that time in my life. There was a lot of good, more than bad in that relationship, but we were both being held back by it. And so it was the right thing for that to shift. And it was the level of crazy, mind-blowing, like, I fixed my seemingly permanent injury and then my whole life changed dramatically type of experience I needed to really kick me into investigating tuning further. And luckily at that point I had a podcast audience, and I had some friends willing to be experimented on, and I had a lot more free time because I was single. So I started trying it out on people and offering, you know, sessions where I'm basically trying to figure it out. Because I know Eileen offers training through the Biofield Tuning store, and I recommend people go to that. I'm not saying not to do that, but A, I didn't have like income to throw at that, and B, I just needed to know that it was real for myself. I needed to figure out my way of doing it. I needed to investigate it, not be like, I'm doing this the way I was told to do it because this is the right way to do it. I needed to just wing it, wing my way through it. And along the way, I discovered so much more than what is in her books. And I have been tuned by certified tuners and other self-taught tuners. And I will say it's interesting to be tuned by both, because the standard method is extremely effective, efficient, and well thought out. You know, a lot of experience and knowledge went into that. The intuitive method, for people that are, I guess, brave enough to figure it out in that way, has also been really powerful in the results. I've had extreme breakthroughs with both sides of the coin. And I think a lot of the time, the training and the certificate we get for something is more just like our permission slip that, yep, you're allowed. You know, you're allowed to do it now. And that permission slip isn't coming from the one who handed you the piece of paper. It's really your permission slip to yourself. And you needed that story of the external authority giving you the thumbs up or the green light to feel like you're comfortable to do it. But the truth is, when you are following something that you're called to do on a soul level, spirit level, even though the leap of faith is scary and like, what if I'm not ready? I'll tell you, you feel that way every day, no matter how far, how long you've been flying since jumping off the cliff. And that's just fine. That's part of the excitement. And that's part of the trust that is needed in your worldview to actually succeed in your soul path, if you want to call it something cheesy like that. But the cool thing is, especially in a sort of healing arts work with authenticity, I assume, that you, because in my experience, this is how it's always been, you will be presented the situations that A, you're ready for, and B, you need to learn about as you're ready to learn about them in perfect order. So I've never really been thrown anything as a self-taught tuner that I was not equipped to help. Yet, as the years have passed, what I'm able to help with and comprehend and deal with in people's health situations and biofield situations has become much more complex and robust and complete. And so to me, I've heard woo new age people call it like soul clients or whatever, but you get the person that you're ready to help, and that's who comes to you. And that's how it works. And that's part of, you got to trust that if you're going to take the leap of faith, like that, God is not going to be like, look at this idiot trying to do what he knows he should and what's right. I'm going to throw him this curveball. He's going to get knocked off the horse. That is not how God works. That's not how life is, but we deep down, I think that's kind of what we're afraid of, even though we don't put it in those terms, not just try to make light of it, because I know we've all felt that way about the thing that we were scared to do, but we feel called to do. So yeah. And that's what's got me to this point, years later, I've tuned hundreds of people and I'm still learning as I go, but it's come a long way. I'll say that.
Yeah. Can I just say, I have to share, that resonates for me so deeply what you just said, because that's exactly what happened with me with human design. So I first came to human design like a few years ago, around not too long before I met Isaac. And I was just fascinated by it, like just for myself at first. And I was just like literally just Googling everything in my human design chart. I didn't really know anything about it. And then I just started like listening to more podcasts about it and like learning more and more and more. And just like everyone I knew, I was like, oh my God, do you want to look at your human design? I'd like pull up their charts and I'd start like, and that's how I started learning, like was just looking up other people's charts and like reading about all the different aspects. And it got to the point where like people started like it got out that I was like into human design. And so people started asking me to read their charts and they were offering to pay me. And I was like, I actually remember the first person that ever asked, it was like through a connection through my mum. And she was like, yeah. So I told her like, yeah, you'd probably be happy to do it. And I got angry at my mum because I felt so inadequate to be paid to read someone's chart that I was like, why would you say that? And I got really angry at her. And anyway, I ended up doing it. And then like more and more people started asking me for readings. And I was like, okay, cool. And like, I think that's such a perfect example of what you said, Chance, because I hear this a lot from people when they start doing like what they're meant to be doing. That's kind of what happens. It's like you said, it's just like the universe just starts showing up in your life in these ways where you'll just like, go this way. Like this is what you're meant to be doing. And like the people will show up and just start like asking you to like do these things in my case. And, it's really interesting because I was completely self-taught up until like about a month ago. I did like a beginner's course. It was just like it's like a segue into the advanced practitioner course. And I did that and I was like, I knew everything in the course and I was like, okay, that's cool. And it was like kind of validating. But then now going through the advanced practitioner course, it's almost halfway through and this has cost me thousands of dollars. And I literally am halfway through and I'm just like, wow, I paid thousands of dollars to just feel validated in everything that I know. Like, and yeah, and it's so crazy because...
Well, that's worth it in a way. It's a valuable lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. Very valuable lesson. And yeah, just what you said is just, it's so true because I think it's not about how other people view you. It's how you view yourself. And literally up until this point, I just kept thinking, I don't know enough. I haven't been like formally trained. And going through the course, I'm just like, wow, I really know a lot. And in saying that, I can also appreciate, I've always loved with human design learning from different people because you always hear things explained in a different way or you get different insights. And I'm actually loving this particular teacher. So it's still super valuable, but also I'm just like, wow, I just paid thousands of dollars to feel validated.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Or go ahead, Isaac. Get in there.
No, it's just kind of funny because I think about this all the time. Like There's somebody I saw on a reel somewhere, this goofy old guy, and he's like, hey, you can just do stuff. You don't need to ask anybody for permission. You can just go and do it. Just figure it out. Just do it. And I feel like I do that a lot. And Alexa kind of makes fun of me sometimes because I'm a typical 3-5-5-3, whatever the heck. 3-5 man gen, where I'm just like trial and error.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm just, I don't know. Like there's some things I'll go to like people that are really talented for, like Chance with tuning and all these things. I'm like, they're really talented at it. What I'm talented at, I just go and do it, like making topical remedies, experimenting with things, combining things that are unusual. But I was like, what about, like, remember Galen of Pergamum? He's like one of the first physicians doing brain surgeries ever. He just did it. He just was like, I think I can just buy dead bodies and take them home and like cut them up and figure it out. I'm not going to do that, but like,
there's like, so many people. I mean, look at Eileen McCusick's story. Like
she just did it. She would probably agree with you, Chance, as far as the intuitive way, because that's how she came to it. So yeah.
It's funny you brought up talent, because in my mind I was thinking about saying this, and then you just validated it because you're probably more psychic than you realize. You probably picked this up off of me from across the world, but talent is kind of a bogus concept. And it comes, first of all, it's interesting that we even use the word talent to represent the concept of I guess, it's taken to mean like a God-given inherent ability or skill that is different than what most people have, your God-given talents. But a talent is a measure of money. It's a sum of money. It's a weight of coinage or gold. So when we're talking about talents, is our talent only that which is worth money? It's like, is that really what we mean by it? Oh, they're so talented. That's interesting. Like they're well paid at it, or they should be. My point being, we should really re-examine the idea of talent. And I say this all the time, but what makes me talented at tuning or able to teach myself? It's because it was the most important thing to me in the world. So, what makes you talented at human design? It was the most interesting thing to you. You cared about it. So we should really, I'm not hating on you, Isaac, for saying the word talent, because it's something we all say, and it's sort of a ubiquitous idea, but I think it's an erroneous idea, and we should really just nix that word. And I like aptitude. That's a good word. But we should comprehend aptitude.
Like your inherent gifts, or you're gifted at something.
Right.
Well, think about, though, I do believe people have inherent gifts, but are they really like unattainable for others? Where do those gifts come from? I've really thought about this, because when I started the show, one of the main reasons I started the show is because I wanted to talk to artists specifically. I'd been involved in the psychedelic music festival, transformational arts scene for a couple of years. And I had all these interesting conversations with creative people. And I was like, how do they do it? How do they get their booth and go out to that festival and paint paintings and just surf on the uncertainty of whether or not they're going to sell enough art to eat that week or pay their rent or make it to the next event? How do they do it? What's the secret? I'm interviewing these people, like trying to get to the bottom of it. Tell me how to do it. Tell me how to do it. I want to do that. I want to make it by my own steam of what I care about and not have to work a normie job. Nobody can tell me. Nobody can tell me, until I had to do it myself. And now I can talk about it. It's a leap of faith. You just do it. Opportunities arise. Think of it like if you want a video game where the next quest is going to be marked somewhere on your heads up display at all times, meaning that you will be presented opportunities at the pace at which you capitalize on those opportunities or turn them down. And there will always be the next one. There will always be the next one. You will know what to do. It's one step at a time. So many different axioms and platitudes I could regurgitate about it now that I get it. But the aptitude, man, it's not an intrinsic thing. It's a function of care. And I really want people to think about that and just dispel from their mind, that person is really good at that and I could never do that. especially if it's something you care a lot about. If
Yeah.
you care enough about it, you can figure it out. There's nothing
totally agree.
there's nothing that's more powerful than your care. That care is the thing that makes everything happen. You know,
Yeah, I
care is
just
the
want to underline
ultimate.
that point. Absolutely. I totally agree with that, because what popped into my head was when you said aptitude, I was like, yeah, even that, like I didn't have an aptitude for languages when I went into the army. I was tested to see what language I would be able to get. And languages can be divided into categories in the military. So language level 1 would be like Spanish, Tagalog, I think that's a Filipino thing or somewhere. Really easy languages. I tested for Spanish. That was like my level. They're like, you're good at this. Stay here. But I wouldn't, it just doesn't process. And I was able to just ask somebody, and I'll ask and just find my way into weird situations. And I asked if I could just do Russian, which is like a level 3 or 4. And they're like, sure. So I just skipped over my place in life and went up and did Russian. And me and one other guy had the top scores in our class. But it was desire, and it was belief in yourself, and a little bit of like, it was almost like foolish wisdom, if you could call it that. And the same thing with the medical training that I did. And then you go on to other things in life, starting a business, like you did, when you just take the leap of faith, like you just said, and you have this, I don't know, the willingness to crash and burn, but this belief that you won't. Or maybe you're just focused on that next step, and then you just keep focusing on the next step, and eventually you're walking and then running. So I definitely encourage people to really listen to that again.
People that crash and burn on their entrepreneurial path, what I've observed is that it's always coincide with burnout. Like they burn themselves out, maybe through the wrong motivation, maybe seeking those talents, if you will, instead of it being, that grind that can come out of it. But I will just say your attitude determines your aptitude. They're really like etymologically kind of the same word. Your fitness.
So true.
Aptitude is your fitness or what's appropriate for you. So yeah, the language side of things is really fun. There's a couple things I had an idea of talking about with you guys while I was mulling it over today. And one of them was this experience I had at the, what is it? It's called the Imaginarium. It's like an indoor children's play place for kids like 6 and under. And I take my daughter there to give her mother a break, some break time, some alone time. And we were there, and I was the only dad there most of the time that I was there. But this other dad comes in, and I see on his leg there's Greek letters. Interestingly enough, they were right on his ankle. Back to the Achilles thing. And I was like trying to turn my head sideways, like which is, because one of the letters at the end was Achilles, which is like, or key, looks like an X, and that could be the beginning of the word or the end of the word. I was trying to figure it out, and then I saw it, and I was like, okay, the word was charis, and I was like, hey man, I really like your leg tattoo, charis. It means grace. That's my daughter's name. My daughter's name is Grace. And he's like, whoa, you could read that? And I was like, yeah. And I just like to study alphabets. And I don't speak Greek. I speak a little. I do speak a little, but, not really anywhere near fluent. But I can read the alphabet. I can read the words. And then studying the relationship between different languages, their alphabets specifically, you can learn a lot about the meaning of a word. So, for example, I'm going to use this as an example because studying alphabets is like a key to the matrix. You can unlock so much hidden gravy in, you can literally look at words in another language and figure out what they mean if you have the etymological skills or philological skills, whichever you want to call it. I call it philological, actually. Studying languages and alphabets. It means love of language. Philo, love, ology, logos. And how I knew that this word charis meant grace, for example. Even though the key is not the third letter, phonetically it's the sound of like a k or the letter C, And the third letter of the Greek alphabet, gamma, which is a G. but the third letter of the English alphabet is a C. The English alphabet and the Greek alphabet are very close in order of the letters that correspond to each other. So A, B, C, alpha, beta, gamma. And when you think about like the rules of philology, one way you can intuit your way through it is what does my mouth do when, what's the arrangement of my tongue and my lips when I make this letter sound? So G, the letter G, 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 and the letter C, K, K. Just feel how that feels in your mouth. It's almost identical. And depending on even somebody's sort of like accent or dialect, you might really do more of a G when the letter is a K. So, charis, right? Grace, grace, charis. You see how it's very close to the same word.
Yeah.
And there you go. That's like an example of how knowing letter swaps, you can figure out what a word might mean. But what's even cooler is when you start to learn some words in other languages and see even more fun connections. Like I said to this guy, because I got the vibe from talking to him that the tattoo had like a spiritual significance to him, like the grace of God. And I was like, do you know what the Greek word for that they use for Lord in the New Testament is when they're talking about Jesus? And he didn't, and it's kairos. Or sorry, it's kurios. I'm sorry. Kairos means time, which is also very close. But kurios and charis, very close to the same word right there. So Lord and grace, similar word. And then if you go even further, go over to Persian, kuros means the sun. So, you start to do these jumps and you're like, wow, this word means different things across different languages, but it's all representing the same thing. It's the sun and grace, which is just being given something out, literally like a gift from the divine is what you would consider grace. While the sun is like that gift, it just keeps giving.
Yeah.
It keeps giving. Doesn't matter how naughty of a boy you've been, that sun's going to rise tomorrow and keep you alive. It's the ultimate grace, and it is the Lord of the zodiac, and it's the Lord of the sky. It's the seat of the Lord, you could say. So that's just like a little language flow that I was thinking about today, because that was my personal experience. And
It's
it's
so
nice to be able
interesting.
to read other alphabets. It can
It's
teach you so much.
superpower, man. It's something that I'm profoundly curious in. There's, you pick up these little breadcrumbs along the way. I grew up reading the Bible and stuff, but then I got into extra biblical texts. There's one called the Book of Jasher, and in the Book of Jasher, it has a little bit of deeper histories of things or stories, including something about Egypt that I found really profound as it relates to languages. In fact, some of the earlier pharaohs were picked to be a pharaoh partially because of the number of languages they had mastery of. And one of them mentioned, I think in the Book of Jasher, something like 120, 130 languages that he spoke.
Wow.
And I have this belief about the ancient stories about Babel and Egypt and where they're connected was when the languages were scattered, when they built the Tower of Babel and God, to confuse them, scattered their languages so they couldn't understand each other. And then you look at the so-called language of Egypt, and I don't know where you are on that, well, the hieroglyphics and all that, but I imagine if languages were scattered and they couldn't commute with each other, but they were priest class, they were these people that were highly tuned in, highly skilled in this wisdom of how things work, they could craft symbols that would communicate what those languages all were trying to say from different tongues. And so a language of symbols emerged. And when you start learning these multiple languages, and especially on your level where you go even deeper and you're looking at the very symbol of each letter and what it can mean and how there's these intersections in meaning, I liken it to being able to see through walls, maybe even physical walls, but like theological walls, ideological walls, cultural walls. You can see through all of that with these symbols if you learn to read them and speak them.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of like X-ray vision, because the language barriers are one of the things that really kept humanity in sort of a darkened state in their spiritual life, I'll say. Because it's not that the religions themselves are dark, but when humanity is trapped in a purely exoteric understanding of the religion, where they're given fables and told that those are historical truths, while never given any of the allegorical meaning about the truths of nature that those stories represent, is a huge problem for them. It's a huge problem for people, and that's part of one of the things I explore a ton in the last years of my show is religious mythology, syncretism. And the biggest key to that is language, because you're able to determine through language how different characters in different mythologies are the same name, just with the letters are changed because of the alphabets that are used. And that can be, that's hugely eye-opening. It comes down to, this is the kind of thing that's hard to talk about without some preparation beforehand, because it's like the devil's in the details with this type of thing. And we have some really deep shows, myself and my friend Dylan Sakosio, a podcast called Inner World, where we tackle different aspects of this in deep analysis. But my ultimate conclusion is that the ancient systems of spirituality did not really have all these hundreds and thousands of gods, but that later interpretations of these things were applied like from a later time, and there is assumed to be all these different gods. What it really appears to be, once you study the language, is that there was only ever like one god, and he had many different titles and epithets and personas that would typify him at different times of the year or allegorize different parts of nature's cycles, particularly the seasons, most primarily. And that those titles and epithets were mistaken for names, or descriptions were mistaken for names, or intentionally obfuscated to be names. And I think probably there's a lot of intentional obfuscating, because when the Catholic or the Holy Roman Empire arose, that what to me seems like it was a corporate rebranding, like a takeover of a pre-existing system. They needed to create the illusion of originality for their savior, when I feel like anybody with any kind of logic whatsoever,
it's like MAGA,
would be like, why would God only give the savior to one place in the world, and he would wait a long ass time before he gave that savior? Like, wouldn't the savior be eternally available and always accessible? That's the other side. Like on a mystical side, I look at it like I have that conspiratorial brain that wants to say, yeah, the priest class was intentionally keeping humanity in the dark about the mystical secrets of the religions. But then on the other hand, I'm thinking, what if the monomyth, the savior, the destruction and rebirth of the world, and the dying and resurrecting savior that are the same thing? What if that's something that shows up through human consciousness and is just an emergent feature of this reality? Like, I've heard it said, and I really believe this, that the truth is always in the room. And the more you think about that principle or axiom and really meditate on it, maybe even like with hindsight to times in your life where you filtered out the truth from yourself, but later you realize the truth was there all along, staring you in the face. The truth is always in the room. And even though, in my opinion, the mythology of the savior is a fable, what it represents is something deeply true. And we could get into that on a metaphysics concept, on a consciousness concept. But that, to me, the more I look at it, the more I'm kind of a bothist, where like, yep, there was some shady stuff going on with priest classes trying to gatekeep the knowledge. And then also it's an emergent faculty of human consciousness that we tell this story or this monomyth to each other, or we discern this story out of observing nature. And somewhere in every human life, it's like that story, a version of it, is going to make itself known to that human being. Not because you have to believe to be saved, but so that you understand or so that you have the opportunity to connect with a higher force, and that higher force is representative that in the Christian tradition we call Jesus Christ. And I think that there's a very absolute reality to that Son of God, or second person of the Trinity, if you want to call him that. And we could talk about how I think that works on a philosophical level, or we could go somewhere else, but that's kind of, I don't know, I'm just really rambling right now.
There's so many places we could go with it, but I love how you just explained that, because I've had this conversation with a girlfriend who, has recently sort of come to Christianity, but is going down that path of like, you must take Jesus Christ, take the name of Jesus Christ. And it's like, the problem I have with that kind of sect of Christianity is that they speak about Jesus as if he's God. And to me, that almost like goes more into the realm of like that satanic worship of man, where they worship the man over God. And I'm not saying that like Jesus shouldn't be admired, because there's a lot of beautiful lessons and a lot of beautiful teachings. And I've personally had an experience of Jesus and felt that like unconditional love that, everyone talked about that he had. But again, that comes from God, and we all have the capacity to experience that and like emit that from our own being. And that's one of my arguments with that whole thing too, is that because they believe that if you don't take the name of Jesus Christ or whatever, you're not going to be saved. And I disagree with that, because like what you just, like the way that you just put it was just, it's like hit the nail on the head of like why I always ask that question, because that's what I was, this conversation I had with my girlfriend, I said, so I don't believe that you have to believe in this one person to quote unquote be saved. Like you can still have a connection to God, and you can still be very close to God. Like I think of all the other different, not just religions, but just like these philosophies that, people live by. Because like, I guess Buddhism, I don't know, I've never really classed Buddhism as a religion as such, but you look at something like that and they can be very spiritually connected to the all, to the divine, whatever you want to call it. And they don't believe in Jesus, but I think that they will still always be protected by God just by way of being connected to him.
Well, I'm gonna read a quote from one of my favorite authors, the Reverend Robert Taylor, from the early 19th century. This was a guy who was a priest in the system, in the club, and he started pulling the thread of like the esoteric underpinnings of Christianity. One of my favorite quotes from him, not the one I'm about to read, is the different Christianity and paganism are about as different as 6 and half a dozen. Because he figured out he wrote a book that's really incredible. He went to jail for this book. So that tells you what it was like for him even just a couple hundred years ago. Book called astro-theological lectures, astronomical theological lectures. That's what it is. Astronomico. It's a bigger word. We just say astrotheology now. And it's a really amazing book. There's chapters in it about Satan or the devil. And, long story short, there's all, when you really when you look at the text, especially when you can read the Bible with the languages that it was allegedly written in, you will see, outside of your modern translations of the Bible, that the devil figure, as he's believed in by most Christianity, does not exist in the holy book that they profess to take their religion from. And it originates, the first mention of Satan is in the book of Job. Very interesting book. Job chapter 1, verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. So that's right there. Like, we should back up. Who's the devil? And Robert Taylor says about this, knowing then who the sons of God are, we know who Satan was. For when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, Satan came also among them. Satan, then, was one of the sons of God, and brother of our Lord Jesus Christ, with this only distinction, that he was the favorite, and his advice and counsel consulted by God, who suffered his son Jesus Christ to be crucified and slain, but never suffered the devil to get into any trouble whatever. That's the kind of stuff that got him put in jail.
Oh yeah,
But-
I can see that challenging some. That's ruffling some priestly skirts.
Yeah, very
But
interesting.
what he just said is absolutely biblically accurate. You know, God had caused all this or allowed all this suffering to Jesus, but Satan never got into any trouble at all. And even in the
Yeah.
book of Job, he's taking Satan's advice. They're having very friendly conversation. The point being, when you really understand I have entire episodes in our show Inner World about, it was a two-parter. I think altogether it was probably 6 or 7 hours of deep research that me and Dylan presented. Like, that show is not an interview show. It is we both do tons of research, and then we present our notes to each other with slides and stuff. It is, if you're curious
Awesome.
about this stuff, like, it doesn't get more in-depth and deep than that. Than that show on this subject. But the point being that in those devil episodes, we make a really, really strong case that the devil figure and Jesus are the same entity, and it's the threefold being: creator, preserver, destroyer. It's all one. It's one guy, mythologically speaking, but even more so that when you really understand the trickster archetype that Jesus embodies in a archetypal sense, and that's literally the destroyer preserver shows up in that way. Like, they call Jesus Jesus and Satan are both the morning star, literally in the Bible, given the same titles occasionally. It's been so long since we did that research, I can't give you the full gravy on it, but I agree with what you say, Alexa, that there's an idol worship to Christianity that is very unhealthy. And the story of Jesus is awesome, but only when we really get past the modern interpretation. I liked, and this is a feather ruffler, I guess. I don't just believe in God. I know God, and I even know the savior aspect of the Trinity personally, but it's way bigger than just this tiny little guy on a cross story, which is a great story if you can get to the underpinnings of it. You can get beyond the just literal historical meaning. But the problem is, when you have this modern interpretation, we get the irony of it is because there's so many people that are like hardcore fundamental Christian believers, and even more and more so now, who on the other hand, they're huge Trump worshipers, and they also are like, yeah, COVID, man, the government, man,
Right. Yeah, very
Cooties,
low discernment.
but hey, isn't your guy the guy who gave Operation Warp Speed and was like the father of the cowpoke? That's my code word for it.
Cowpoke.
Baka
Yeah.
means cow. Baka is the word for cow. So when they're talking about the V word, they're talking about their cattle, But so your guy, you're this Christian right that loves that guy. They also, hate what happened during Cooties, and they blame it all on Biden. But Biden wasn't the guy that started lockdowns. And the point being, none of that could have happened. And none of this cowpoke business would ever happen without Christianity as the foundational moral framework for the United States of America and a lot of the westernized world. And I'm not saying it's all bad. There's a lot that's good in that moral framework. Great. I actually really like Big Bear's talk on his take on Owen Benjamin's take on Islam versus Christianity, about how he thinks Islam has a lot of superior aspects because it's law-based. It's about rules. Maybe those aren't the right rules, but like the idea that your religion should constitute some rules for society, I think that's pretty astute. The point being, I'm kind of getting rambly, but modern Christianity is founded on this idea of the Savior who sacrificed himself for everybody else. And that sounds a lot like the left shoulder stuff we started the conversation talking about. And, who was Achilles? Achilles was a son of God, mythologically speaking. Wow, interesting.
Yeah,
Talking
these
about
things have a lot of layers that overlap. And I just want to like, you know, something that popped up with all that. I'm not sure. I'll have to go and listen because I'm curious what you guys came up with as far as Jesus and Satan being the same thing. But it just called back to me what Jesus said about it, because he was accused of that in the New Testament. And he said, can Satan cast himself out? Because he was casting out demons. And then I've had a conversation with Patrick, Ardo's survival bear or wild med bear, and his experience with these entities or demons or sleep paralysis things, and calling on the name of Jesus to cast them out. And I've had a few people on, not so much on this, but we did have, what's his face?
Well, we just had Cal Washington on recently, and
then the psychiatrist.
Jerry
Jerry
Marzinski.
I want to talk about this, but we're getting a little away from the big point I was about to make. If you don't mind if I finish that off.
Sure.
We can come back to that because that's an interesting reality that is true.
Yeah.
Okay, so the main hero of the religion is the guy that sacrifices himself for everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. How does but when you really put that on paper, if who we're supposed to emulate is the guy that lets the crowd kill him for the crowd's benefit, and we all emulate that, that's called my mask doesn't work unless you wear your mask.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm getting my shot, I'm getting my shot for everyone else.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
We all sacrifice ourselves for the crowd. Everybody is sacrificed. Whoops. And that is the messiah.
Yeah.
And we gotta really get clear about that is not what we were meant to take from the story of Jesus's death and resurrection. That is not it.
I can get behind that for sure.
I absolutely 100% agree with that. And I just wanted to tie in because you just brought up, we interviewed Cal Washington recently, and to your point, Chance, he basically said the same thing. Not that Jesus and Satan were the same person, but essentially that's what he was saying. Like, we all contain both. We live in a realm of duality, and we all have that capacity within us for good and evil. And I think that just sums it up, really, to put it really simply. And I think, again, in these, certain Christian circles, they don't even want to look at that a lot of the time. I mean, it depends on what you're looking at, because in Catholicism, it's all about, well, if you do the wrong thing, you're going to go to hell and the devil's going to get you and all of that. And it's guilt and shame. But then you've got these other Christian circles that don't even want to look at it. It's all love and light, and it's all just believe in God and Jesus and you'll be saved. And they can't even look at that. Like, it's like the spiritual bypassing thing. So yeah, I think, again, you just put it really perfectly. I totally agree.
Yeah. I'm more like John.
Well, who do they associate the most with the devil?
When they try to,
Who do they associate with Satan in Genesis, right? The serpent?
The serpent. Yeah.
Well, let me put it this way. What would have happened if the serpent hadn't tempted Eve to eat the apple? Think about it.
Well, ultimately, there'd be no need for Jesus.
Yeah, but what else? What else? Nothing would have happened. That's what.
Well, that's literally what the first thing I was going to say. Nothing.
Well, nothing would have happened. Robert Taylor says, the devil is the grand ally of priests. No devil, no priests. But he also says, if there be no devil, there be no savior. Mm-hmm. I'm going to just read some more Taylor quotes because I've always got these on deck because he's so amazing. You cannot take away the foundation stone of the great Christian pillar, aka the Savior, and leave the fabric standing. So long as Christianity continues to be part and parcel of the law of the land, its ever to be venerated forms will continue to ascribe all evil deeds to the instigation of this mighty spirit, aka the devil. The felon and the criminal only become such by the perpetration of such heinous acts as they were led to perpetrate, not having the fear of God before their eyes, but being instigated by the devil. And if there were indeed no devil, or if he were merely an imaginary being or personification of evil, an allegorical figure only, what is to hinder all the other personages spoken of in the gospel from being merely imaginary beings and allegorical figures as well as he? So what he's getting at is, like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. do you have free will, or is everything the devil's fault? You know, it's the scapegoat figure, and it's absolutely ridiculous when you think about it philosophically, like that there would be that you could have any kind of, you could blame humanity's evils and ills on this figure, as people are wont to do from their interpretation of the Garden of Evil or Garden of Eve, Garden of Eden story. But think about it. What happens when the serpent, we'll say, not the devil, but what people think is the devil, tempts Eve to eat the apple? She realizes she's naked. She gives Adam the apple. He realizes he's naked. He realizes his wife is sexy, and he wants a piece of that. I'm being a little crass, but like, okay, one of the names for the savior figure or the son of God in Greek was Eros, which is a form of love. They say God is love. Well, one of the forms of love is erotic love, because when you think about the alchemical aspect of the mercury, right, which is the solvent or salvation, the savior. Jesus is a mercury figure. Literally, Jesus' mother is Mary. Mercury's mother is Maya. You know, it's the same deal. What makes a mercury figure alchemically is that the mercury goes between the two divided sides, or the male and the female sides, you could say, or the positive and the negative. The mercury, or the good and the bad, the good and the evil. That's why it's a trickster spirit. Literally, it takes away from one side and brings to the other. It sort of balances things in a way. That's what mercury is for. In alchemy, that's what it's used for. That's why it's Eros, because when you think about this on like electrical sense, these two poles of north and south, or male and female, the divine spark of life that creates life, it generates life, is the erotic impulse between the male and the female. If that erotic impulse did not spark, and your mom and dad did not copulate, essentially, you would not have been conceived, and you would not be born. If Adam and Eve had not had the erotic impulse given to them by the serpent, allegorically, then they would have never bore children. They would have never been fruitful and multiplied. Yes, they would not have had sin, I guess, you know, allegedly, but they would have just been in this perpetual state in the garden where nothing would happen. No human progress would occur. No existence would really ever unfold, and humanity. So I'm just saying the serpent figure is the savior, because he saved humanity. But you gotta look
at the whole story, though,
creating the erotic spark.
There's potential, if you look into more of this stuff, that there were already populations on the earth by the time Adam and Eve were there. Potentially, there might have been even populations before that whole story. You know, and this is going beyond.
Well, that is in the language
Genesis. Yeah,
so there's a lot going on. And multiply, the actual word in Hebrew is replenish. Replenish there.
Yeah, it could be a whole reboot
but
or
then
something.
That's another can of worms, because when you understand, or when you start to look deeply into the pattern of cosmology or cosmogonies, like creation stories, they are always also destruction or flood stories. So that pattern being very, very, very replete throughout all cosmogonies and cataclysm stories, it stands to reason that the clues that are in Genesis that tell you that that's what it was too, are valid clues. So there is not really an in the beginning, ex nihilo, out of nothing. It's a new cycle is beginning, right? My point being, it's not like you should worship the serpent or worship the devil. That's idolatry too. My point is that the savior is more than just a guy that sacrificed himself for everybody else, and we should all like aspire to be self-sacrificing. The savior is the spark of attraction, or the care, or the impulse, you know, like that deep desire within you is, and this is completely antithetical to what is really taught by Christianity. It's totally a missed point. It's actually something that I've learned a lot about just by working in people's energy fields. One of the main problems in humanity today, especially with men, is a complete disconnect from the primal, essential, like feeling base of desire. And, you know, we spend our time trying to figure out what other people want us to do, what other people want of us. You know, we like the man, for example, in most modern relationships, part of what has sort of like sissified things and you know, for lack of a better phraseology, is that men maybe have realized that what causes us a feeling of like arousal or excitement for them about their woman is when the woman wants them. You know, men feel turned on by being wanted by their woman. And that's as far as they've figured out. So their strategy tends to be, and I know because I've been there, their strategy is, how can I make my woman want me? Completely misunderstanding that. And then now all of a sudden we're wanting somebody else to want something, to want us. You know, we're not really in an authentic, what do I want? And they don't understand that behavior pattern of trying to make the woman want them is like this, like simp behavior, you could call it, is a huge turnoff to the woman inevitably, eventually. What turns the woman on towards the man is the man who is very passionately, authentically following his own deepest desire in life.
Yeah.
You know, the woman's like, I'll come along with you. I'm on my way. You know, don't leave without me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's like, so, you know, and then that's back, like, and that's the dynamic that creates a healthy, stable mom and dad family. You know, mom and dad both present and loving each other and cooperating with the male in the leadership role in like a traditional conservative sense. And so my point being, like, literally the erotic impulse, which is not necessarily sexual, but it's the sexual energy in the sacral chakra, second chakra, you know, that deep drive to satisfy that thing within you that wants something, which we've been taught is like a bad impulse because religion has associated that with sex is naughty. And like, look what happened to Adam and Eve. See, sex has been naughty from the beginning. That old serpent got into their heads about sex, and like, look where it led us. Now we're all fallen and sinful, born sinful. Actually, that energy is the thing that saves your ass. You know, it's the thing that saves humanity. And that, you know, it's not, see, the two things are tied together because that following your desire as a male is what creates the erotic energy between you and the female. So they're the same thing, you know. It's like you pursue that in the right way, in a non-carnal, like a non-sexual way. You sublimate that sexual energy into a purpose, you know, into a creation of something that matters to you. Then you get that energy from the female, comes to you, and you make a baby. You know, you have a family, and that family is tightly tied together. So I hope this is making sense, but like literally Jesus is Eros. And you know, you dive into the mythological connections, like that guy Eros is Phanes. He's light. He's the first being. He's the firstborn son of God. It's the same guy in an archetypal sense. But that's been completely,
there's a thing that we learned
bastardized by modern religion, and instead they've made him the guy who puts himself aside for everybody else, which is the opposite of what the savior energy actually is. So I get a little like,
I agree to an effect, but for the family, that is what the man does. He does lay down his life for his wife and for his children. You know, his job is to protect them. He does embody that warrior archetype. And there is a place for a bit of that, like, you know, stepping in to fill the gap and bleeding for others.
Hear me out, Isaac, though. Is the dad going to throw himself at some social cause or some self-sacrifice for the collective, for all humanity, and then be dead and gone, no longer there to protect or be there for his family?
I mean,
no.
He might.
My point is the savior, the Messiah is like, you are sacrificing yourself for all, right? Yeah. When we're talking about that deep, primal, sacral energy of desire that exists inside of us as our main creative driving force, there's nothing different about that desire for everywhere else in life that's authentic than the desire to protect your wife, your child, or provide for your
Yeah.
wife and your child. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So I hope
Yeah,
that
what I'm
makes sense.
saying
And
is in the context,
pursuing your
it makes
purpose on a
sense.
desire level is the thing that creates, will give you the abundant. Okay, let me put it this way. Abundance, right? This kind of new age concept. It deals with, we talk about abundance in a woo sense, like a manifesting abundance. If I just believe it hard enough, if I just do the right little rituals of belief and I don't think about anything negative, then I can get the thing that I want and get abundance. But in a biofield sense, this fulfillment is what we're talking about when we talk about abundance. The gratification or the satisfaction of a need or a want. And that's a sacral level thing. And that's on the front end of the sacral chakra, we see energy that governs that dynamic of desire, satisfaction, fulfillment. And when stuck or not flowing, manifesting as resentment and frustration and disappointment. On the back end of the left side, what is driving all of that is just the general concept of flow in the body and in life. So your creative flow state, the feeling of effortless effort, which again, care or desire is the aptitude that gives you the ability to be in that flow state and make it look easy. But so in a literal sense, and I've seen this in people's energy fields enough to know this is completely true. If you conceptualize abundance and the flow of abundance to you from the external world, like, the material things we need to thrive and survive, conceptualize that as a river. Desire is the current in that river. And the more cut off from your true, authentic desire you are, the more retarded, as in like slowed down, the flow of abundance or material fulfillment and like necessary things to fill your belly in a metaphorical and literal sense will come to you. And that's just the truth in an energy dynamics of your biology. Put that in your pocket and think about it if you need to. Desire is the current in the river of abundance. And so again,
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
And so this is why in so many levels, when I say Jesus or the Savior is the erotic energy, I'm talking about the sacral creative energy. And that's the very thing that when we tap into it and sublimate it, brings us that which saves us, like sustains us. Sustainer, preserver, savior, whatever word you want to say. So I mean it really literally, so I'm coming at this I know this from mythology to be true, and from linguistics to be true, and from experiential work in people's energy fields to be true, that the Savior is not sacrificing himself for everybody else. The Savior is the truest, deepest, realest desire. Not superficial desire, not like I want the Bugatti desire, but like purpose-driven desire, real fulfillment, So I'm kind of ranting about that, but trust me, bro.
Well, I think man, like the Christian church and the typical belief about everything has gone through so many, it's been channeled into this weird, warped vestige of what it used to be. And I don't know what it used to be, but I've heard, Josh Del Sol talk about the Essenes, and that stuff sounds really interesting to me, that this historical characters like, John the Baptist and others were in the Essenes. And if you read their works, it's very esoteric. And it sounds like stuff that you've talked about. There's a bit of that in there. There's like a really for the time, very advanced.
The Essenes are referring to the therapeutics or the College of Alexandria, which is in Egypt. This was at the point that the empire, if you will, or the universal priesthood had moved its base of operations to Egypt in the city of Alexandria. And these Essenes, there's literally a quote from Eusebius, the father of church history, one of the earliest documenters in the Holy Roman Empire of the origins of Christianity. He says, verbatim quote, although I guess he's attributing it to a guy named Philo of Alexandria, who's allegedly a Jew who was part of this you could call it a college. It's literally like where they trained their their apostles that were allowed to go out into the world and run this priest jive that they did. And they said, this is directly what Eusebius says. Those therapeutes or those Essenes, that's the same guys, were Christians, but this is before Jesus. Their gospels are the same as our gospels. I'm paraphrasing, but he says, and you can look this up, that group had the gospels before Jesus existed. How could that be unless these gospels are already have always been in existence, aka it's the scripture in the sky?
Yes, it's
that's a huge subject.
DNA at some level, or if DNA even exists, but it is.
There's been a ton of effort to create. There's been a ton of effort by people, well-meaning people, to link historical personages to biblical figures, and I am here to tell you that that is really not a fruitful pursuit, and it doesn't really help us out. You know, it's
I think
bearing
if you apply
false
the
witness
spirit of truth
in a lot of ways.
There's a lot of truth in the Bible. There's a lot of truth written in the stars. I don't view them as exclusively opposing. They're not detracting from each other. It just depends on if you're stuck in
there's tons
an
of
ideology.
truth in the Bible, but history can never be truth.
Right. History
There's
is
no
a
such
lie agreed upon if you believe that.
history.
From,
always
Voltaire.
a story of what happened. Think about your personal history. Do you really have memories, or do you have a story that you've told yourself about something that happened, and your memory is that story? Right? Like you might have
Depends on how
memories
carefully you look at it. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's
well, it
a
depends
lot
on
of
how
stories.
far back you go too, but like even yesterday gets fuzzy, right? So my point being, there's no such thing as a text or an account that is the literal history, and this is the true story. This is exactly what happened, and it covers everything and every part and every facet of everything that happened without any missing details. That does not exist. Period. Yeah. So to pretend like this one magical book has that is it's silly, and really it just flies in the face of the concept of a loving God.
Yeah.
That he would expect us to all trust that really is the book, and this really is the only way. Like it's
Well, that's
silly,
what
man.
I've said that for so long. Like I didn't grow up like religious, and I actually had quite an aversion to like religion and like especially Christianity for a lot of reasons. And I'm kind of just learning more about the Bible now, and I think it is a very important text to read, but like I'm never gonna like completely live my life by it. It's not that I'm not going to take lessons from it, or like certain, like our interview with Cal Washington, honestly, I love, like he just puts things so simply. He knows the biblical stories really well, but he's not like super dogmatic about it. And he puts things really simply where it's just like, oh, I see how this applies to the context of this realm and like the world and what we're currently going through. But like we were talking about this recently after watching an interview with Steve Falconer, and like Steve like kind of Steve talks about like a lot of things like that people, you know, like we were watching a presentation on like how Jews don't really run the world. Like this is this lie that we've been fed, and he goes into all these things. Now, there were things that he presented that, you know, Isaac was listening to. Isaac knows way more about, you know, history and stuff than I do. And Isaac was like, oh, I don't know about
Alleged
that.
history.
Alleged history, yeah. Because, and Isaac's like, I don't know about that, what he's saying, because, you know, these texts say this and this and that, whatever. And at the end of it, we both, like, we had this conversation, and I was like, but if you were to go and look at all the historical texts throughout the world for all of time that we have access to, there are going to be a ton that tell a similar story. There are also going to be a ton that like totally contradict those stories. And so there's just so much nuance. And I think that's the key, is like being able to look at all these different things without any attachments, without being super dogmatic, without being like, this is the absolute truth. Because I think there are a lot of truths, especially when we look at the stories of history, his story. It is going to be always through, and that's the other thing, and that's one of the things I've always said about the Bible, is that it's always been all the writings, they've been written by man. They're all subjective to some degree. They've gone through someone's filter,
including all.
And
of
as
the
soon
Bible,
as you go into the allegorical,
men,
anagogical, multidimensional meaning of a scripture, where it's like you're no longer attached to it has to mean only this, but you realize that it can mean many different things. Yeah. Almost everything except historical literalism. Then the text comes alive.
Yeah.
like a work,
Yeah, but
like a
there
true
are
work,
some
like the
historical
work of art
literalism
that it is.
giants. We got giant DNA.
You know,
We
one
got
thing that
Owen
just
Benj-
popped into my head though about the serpent and Eros that I forgot, but it's such a great detail, is the Hebrew word for serpent actually has a dual meaning. Like, you know, words can mean the same spelling and mean two different things. And the word is orum, or I guess transliterated as orum, but ayin resh vav mem. And that word, that word for subtle, not serpent, subtle. Like the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, right? That's in Genesis 3:1. That word can mean cunning or crafty, can also mean naked. So you could have translated that verse to be the serpent was more naked than any beast than Yahweh
just some
created.
nude guy, some freaking nude Israeli on the beach like we have here. We have this nude beach near us. No one told me it was a nude beach until I went running there, and I just see all these naked dudes running out into the water. I'm like, and they got like black curly hair.
And then to go further,
Israelis.
Serpent in Hebrew, nakash, can also mean shining one. So if you chose two different meanings for words that have dual meanings in that verse, it could have said the shining one was more naked than anyone. And so taking this back to, and this is something we're covering off in the next Inner World episode, where we talk about the Pentateuch and Moses, the Pentateuch being the first 5 books of the Bible, which is allegedly written by Moses, which is weird because he describes his own death and burial. I don't know how you did that. If you wrote
He
the
was
book
on
yourself,
mushrooms.
But anyway, in that episode, the Moses episode, we've talked about it before, but we dive even deeper into the evidence that the Old Testament is a Greek story, was written by Greeks, by Greek Jews in Greek Jews. It's not really a difference when you go back that far in terms of the religion, but it has all the fingerprints of Greek mythology and Greek fables and the astro-theological similarities to Greek fables. And we cover that off in depth. And my point being that in other Greek mythology, the god Eros, aka like naked erotic guy, savior guy, he's also called Phanes, which means shining one. So right there in that verse, you have a clue. Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
In that verse, though, the serpent was more subtle, or the shining one was more naked. Like, you could basically just read that as Phanes was Eros, you know? Anyway, like, this is the kind of little clues
that's
that
what
by
we talk
themselves
about.
maybe don't prove anything, but when you get strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, and you see this pattern over and over again, you're like, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure.
When you
And
think
that's
about
why
it,
it's
like you're
hard to talk
saying-
about this stuff in a conversation without preparation. I feel like we've done a pretty good job.
Yeah.
But I really hope people go
No,
check
there's
out
so much depth you
my
can
real
go
content
to.
on it, where there's tons of preparation and tons of forethought, and I give you the gravy in a great organization that, you know, you'll listen to over and over again and hear something new every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way that the sort of religious mind meld happened and they started getting weird about sex, it's so crazy. That is like anti-life in some way, because you're trying to suppress the very desire that created you, which is directly from God. We were made to do this. Like,
Well, if you wanted to create wealth transfer and wealth disparity, as in like abundance imbalance between one class of people and another class of people, if what I said was true about desire and the sexual erotic energy being the current in the flow of abundance in your life, if what I said is true about that, and you knew that, and you were you had some influence in society, you might engineer a society where everyone repressed their sexual desire, but then you secretly did all kinds of freaky sex magic stuff, and you got all of the gold.
Yeah.
Just
Talk
saying, like,
about
there's
magic.
another point in favor of my theory here, that this was on purpose so that there could be the haves and have-nots, because otherwise, like, left to more natural organization of human hierarchy, as in like families and tribal structure, you would never see that kind of wealth inadequate or like a imbalance. Like, how did that happen? And I'm fascinated with the question of how did that happen, because it seems like you really had to engineer stuff over a long period of time to get it to this point of like, you know, Amazon has $1 bazillion and like we're paycheck to paycheck out here. You know, like we always have enough, right? We always have enough, and we don't need to be like those crazy, absurdly wealthy millions and zillions of dollars people. But like, how did that get that way?
Yeah.
You know, how did that get that way? It's a curious question.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I kind of want to rewind a little bit because something you said during all that, because again, my mind's like sort of, I couldn't help but go back to human design when you were explaining the like the sacral center and the energy of that center, and like when the energy there gets stuck and it's frustration, and like for generators and manifesting generators, the not self theme when they're not in alignment is frustration. And then what you're talking about, like the desire for generators and man gens, it's all about following their joy, like the things that light them up, like those desires, like following that. And I love how
I'm a man gen, so maybe I'm prone to this interpretation.
I've actually got a few questions about, because I was like, I heard you speaking on human design on an interview, like it was probably years ago now, and I did listen to, like I heard a bit of your chart, but I can't remember it. But I was like, my guess is man gen, define spleen. Do you have an open throat? How am I going so far?
Everything's defined except my head.
Ah, interesting. Oh, that's another one. We've just met someone recently who was, it was Mark Gober, completely defined open. He's got an open throat.
Oh, Mark Gober. Love that guy.
Yeah, he's a legend. We just had him on recently. Yeah. And and so I want to kind of.
He was down here in Australia. He came down for the
Living Free Festival. Yeah, we got to hang out with him. It was lots of fun.
Yeah. I haven't got to hang out with him in person yet. We've done a few shows though. I think 3.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I've seen you. We've actually interviewed a lot of the same people.
And I was like, you know me. This guy's perfect.
Yeah.
I've read his books now. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Shout out Mark.
Awesome. Yeah. So I want to kind of, so I just want to bring it back to like in terms of, you know, different sort of, they're not really modalities, but schools of thought on things, and then like bringing it back to the biofield tuning. Like, have you found like there are correlations between, say, for example, because the body graph in human design is based on the chakra system, but in human design, 2 of the chakras split off. So there's 9 centers in the body graph. But also I'm thinking like things like German new medicine, because, you know, we were talking about the left and the right side of the body through the lens of like the biofield. But have you looked into things like German new medicine where they say, you know, like like if you're right dominant, your right side is mother child and the left side is partner other. Like, have you found different things that also correspond with your knowledge on the biofield?
So I don't want to say German new medicine is a bad system, but it overall, like a lot of it doesn't resonate with me because it gets really specific. Like this means this.
Yeah.
Right. And that doesn't, in my experience, that doesn't always hold true. Sometimes there's some categorizations that do hold true. Like left side it's actually back to front to what you said, unless German new medicine says otherwise.
Well, they say it depends on what your dominance is. So if you're left dominant, then your left side will be mother child and your right side will be partner other.
So how I interpret things in terms of a biofield anatomy sense is left side is feminine and maternal, right side is masculine and paternal. Now, here's what I'm going to say, because I think this applies to more than just German new medicine versus biofield tuning, biofield anatomy. What I think is, how do I put this? Because this applies to astrology too, right? Human beings have an amazing capacity to create webs of correspondence and meaning. And we categorize and organize things like this is this and that is that. And the more that we do that, the more we systematize something and familiarize ourselves with that system, the more insights seem to speak to us from between the lines of that intellectual scaffolding. And it's very mysterious, right? Like, why is it that some people will go with the sidereal, true sky astrology, and it's so right for them, and it speaks to them, it tells them everything about themselves and helps them understand layers of themselves. But another person, tropical astrology, and then even going deeper to that, like house systems. this house system works for me. This house system works for them. You know, it gets so specific, and that's always been a big mystery to me. Why do some people really get a lot out of human design, but other people just stick with pure astrology? Why do some people get into German New Medicine and that really works for them? But I look at German New Medicine and I'm like, this isn't really fitting the way that I see these type of correspondences. And anyway, there's so many of these. And I think, you know, it's hard to put into words, but when I ponder this question, I go back to the original, what I think is the original big map of correspondence framework, which is the zodiac and the constellations. I put myself imaginarily back in time to like, who were the people that looked at the sky and all these dots up there and they're like, this means this, this means this, this means this. And before you know it, they've written the entire story of nature's patterns and cycles and seasons, and so much deep truth encoded up there in the little dots. Like, how did they do that? You know, it's almost like it was almost like the original internet in a way, because it, you know, I think that it may have been a profoundly psychedelic type experience where they weren't putting information up there. They were taking information from there, and it was just there and they were perceiving it. I can't think of any other way that such a system could ever have evolved. And some people, it spoke to them more clearly than others, maybe. And those people became what you would consider like shamans, and then evolved into more traditionalized systems over time and generations. And that becomes religions and yada, yada, yada. And I don't know, but I imagine that something like that goes on. But when I think of the mainstream explanation of where astrology came from, oh, well, it was a system designed so that people would know when to plant their plant their seeds and when to harvest and yada, yada. I'm like, I think those mofos could have figured that out without astrology.
Yeah.
I think they could have figured it out without this complex of a system.
That seems easier to do than astrology. Yeah, just figuring out when to plant
easier
things.
than astrology. Yeah. You know, maybe they need some stuff like the moon phases and all that could be helpful. And knowing how many moons it was till this season and that season, yada, yada. And that's pretty simple. That is not constellations and, you know, natal charts and all of that stuff, which, you know, admittedly, some of that, like what they call judicial astrology, predicting things from the stars, that comes, maybe that comes later. Who knows? Who knows how it all came about? Because from our perspective, it's just like there's ancient history and whoop, it's already there. Now that's kind of its own story, because we look at our modern system of constellations, and pretty much the oldest source we have for that is one of the Ptolemies, a book called Almagest, that's like a star chart that is allegedly from the 2nd century AD or 2nd century BC. I can't remember which. One of those 2nd centuries. And Anatoly Fomenko, the Russian statistician, he looked at that Almagest, and he looked at the stellar coordinates in it, and he mapped it in a back tracing of what time period the stars would have been in those coordinates, and was like, this shit's from the Middle Ages. So, the oldest source we actually have in a textual sense of the constellation that we use, that system, is much younger than the mainstream academic historical model would say. That's a whole nother question. Did they add 1,000 years to history? What's going on? Getting sidetracked. But, look, where does this come from? Why is it that when we have complex systems of information and codified systems, something more comes out of it? Even like in modern times, this is happening right now to us. How is it that I can go to chatgpt.com, a complex code of algorithms, and something more is coming out of it? Something more than the sum of its parts is emerging out of it. I'm not saying that it's like alive, but it's a similar thing. I see it as a similar thing. It's almost, if you break it down to simplicity of music, where is the overtone coming from when you play 2 notes or 3 notes and you get that chord comes out where it's bigger than the sum of its parts? There's something extra there. And that is divine. If we really get the simple point of music, where it's like that extra energy that comes out of the chord that wasn't there in the sum of its parts of those individual notes, on a bigger scale, that's what things like astrology are. That's what things like the biofield anatomy are. It's, we recognize that there is something that connects everything. Call it a pattern. Call it a pater, the father. It's the same word, the pattern and the father. It's the word that the priests chose to call themselves, actually. And it's what they call God, the father, the pater. And that pattern, when we invest ourselves into investigating that pattern or weaving patterns of our own, that pattern speaks back to us. It sings to us. It's like God is there as soon as you look. And I think that the divine is that, and this is going back to the Savior being mercurial, liminal, between the lines, between states. That extra little oomph of spirit, it comes alive out of the space between the framework itself. It's like really hard to put into words. I hope this concept is kind of making sense. So I think there's something about that little quiet, but sometimes very distinct spirit that emerges out of patterns to us that allows us to get something more out of astrology, our chosen system, the one that makes sense to us, the one that we know the pieces of, like the sum is greater than the parts. And that is one of the greatest mysteries of being alive that I don't hear spoken about, and I'm still thinking about all the time.
Yeah.
And
what's crazy is the connections, like you were talking about.
That's why it's worth it to learn things and to get, put puzzle pieces together and practice pattern recognition. I think that pattern recognition gives you, opens your ears and your eyes to the divine.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the connection you draw from the intuition about plants, and then the patterns that you start seeing there where, it's been there all along. There's these elements to it. Some of it you can find in books, some of it you can't, but it's like, who wrote the books? How did they find the information? Same thing. There's an intuition. There's a spirit, the ruach or whatever you want to call it. And it's similar to what we see with the synchronicities and the symbols with animals, with numbers on your phone when you start seeing like the quote unquote angel numbers or whatever. But I see that all around, and I'm like, that's how I view the relation with the stars. But on a higher level, I was just looking at this app where you can see the stars on it, and you look and you zoom in and there's all these little constellations, and someone sat there and saw a pattern in the stars and then gave it a name. If I was out there looking at it, it would be something different. I would have named it something else, and I may not have been wrong.
This will bake your noodle, Isaac.
What will it bake your
Chiron,
noodle?
The wounded,
I love
this
that.
will bake your noodle, bro. Chiron, the wounded healer, right? In mythology, the centaur. There's an asteroid called Chiron, named that now. Wasn't discovered until the 70s. Some guy discovered it and named it Chiron. And then astrologers were like, oh, this is named Chiron. I wonder if it represents where you have your wounded healer, wound in your life. Turns out it does. But
who told
turns out
him
that Chiron, where it's placed in your chart, perfectly describes your personal unhealable wound.
Oh, wow.
What?
Yeah.
But this wasn't a part of ancient astrology. This was discovered in the 70s, and the guy just named it Chiron because it had qualities that were similar to the appearance of a comet and to an asteroid. It was a hybrid, like a centaur is a hybrid. So he's like, let's call it Chiron. Turns out that it perfectly illustrates that exact concept of the wounded healer in someone's birth chart. For sure. I've looked at it on a lot of people. I like to, when I have had a client for, a long time, we've done several sessions together. I might do a session with them where I'm like, let's look at your Chiron placement. And we check it out, and it's like, oh, all this work we've done, this one placement explains and ties together that entire thing. Like, here's the theme that ties together everything we've ever worked on together in your healing. So what does that mean, man? And was that always a light in the sky that had the correspondence to that concept? Or was the guy was inspired to call it that just by a divine inspiration, unwittingly calling it what it truly is? I think when you consider how many people's names, their first name, really illustrate the essence of their character. This is something I think people used to know. That's why they call it your Christian name or your God-given name, as opposed to your last name, your family name, right? Like, let me give you another one. This is just a fun one. My daughter, right? We're all into like gematria and woo stuff like that. So
Yeah,
I spelled my daughter's name very specifically so that in the gematria septenary system that Marty Leeds teaches, where it's all based in like 1 through 7 in the letters, we named her Gracie Gabriella Garton, GGG 777, seventh letter. And the way we spelled Gabriella with just one L, it makes her whole name equal 77 in total. And we're like, yeah, this is so cool. This is a great name. We're so heady. And she decides to be born like a week and a half past the 40-week mark on a day that when you add up the numbers of that day, 10 plus 23 plus 20 plus 24, it equals 77.
No way.
How does that happen? You know?
Yeah.
So what does the 77 represent? What does that mean?
What's 7?
I thought it was, well, 7 is like the energy of divinity and like spiritual seeker vibe. Like my life path number in that whole system is a 7. I just thought, of course, like lucky, right? Lucky 777 jackpot.
Yeah.
Like you're lucky.
Yeah.
We just thought it was cool. Like we thought it was fun. And what that means to her will be her journey to discover. But my point is, like, we had this system, we did this pattern, and then the pattern winked back at us because we were dealing with this pattern. Like, but that would have, to most people, that maybe those kind of hugely improbable synchronicities between letters and numbers don't really happen in their name, but do most people's parents name them with respect to the numbers in that intentional way, right? So like that's what I mean. Like you investigate the pattern and it dialogues back at you.
Yeah.
And that's where you start to be like, okay, there's something going on here. There's something behind the curtain. I'm talking to something here.
Yeah.
It's an intelligence
and that's
for sure.
what it is.
Yeah, well, that's why I asked about, like, if you've looked into other systems and they correlate and I love what you said about pattern recognition, because I think it is such an important skill to learn if you're not already pretty adept at it. It's always come very naturally to me, and that's what I find is that, when I started looking at, like, learning more, I will say, about all these different systems, like I've always had an interest in astrology, but then I started doing human design, and that brings in a little bit of astrology. And then, we had we did an episode with our friend Georgina Grace on numerology. And even just in that episode, she was talking about the numbers, and I was like, oh my God, like the numbers she's talking about correspond to some of the gates, and like the energy of, like, in the numbers are like some of the same energies of the gates that correspond to the same numbers. And it's just super interesting. And then when you look at, like I mentioned, like German new medicine or traditional Chinese medicine and meridian theory and Ayurvedic medicine, like there's so many differences, but then there's these common threads. And that's why I think, like, that's for me personally, that's why I love to, like, I feel like I know a little bit about a lot of things, and I love finding those common threads because, like, to me, that's where the truth is. But then I also love the nuances and the differences, because I think, like you said, it's like different things are going to resonate for different people. Like I know people, a lot of people, I've looked up things in German new medicine for them and they're like, that's so spot on. But then I've looked up, I know some people that like look into it and they're just like, nah, doesn't resonate for me at all. And so I love having those, like, lots of different tools in the toolkit, especially when you're working with people. Like when I'm working with people, I like to kind of feel into, like, what resonates for them and then, like, go there.
A lot. Yeah. And that's how it is for me with GNM. A lot of the interpretations, to me, they don't resonate or they feel too specific. Whereas my experiences, I kind of like the biofield anatomy because it deals with more like fields of spectrums of possibility or probability and correspondent relationships between feelings and energies and types of beliefs with parts of the body, but not like this exact diagnosis means this exact life situation. But like a lot of people get a lot out of GNM or German New Medicine, and it works for them, and that's cool. And what I'll say is it is very valuable, if for no other reason than that it's on the track of your body follows your mind.
Yeah.
You know, mental and emotional states are the origin of things in the body going on. And like with my work as a tuner, I often will, especially a new person, their first time getting a session, I'm like, let's be clear. I'm not doing something to you. I'm not doing something for you. I am guiding you through something you're doing for yourself.
Yeah.
And if there was one way to describe what my job is a energy healer, for lack of a better title, and I think all authentic energy healers are this way, is like your body, when something is going on that is diseased or discomfort or injury or etc., is not broken. It's not going wrong. It's not going haywire. It is a message.
Yeah.
It's sending you a message. And so my job as the tuner is the simplest way to describe it. I'm a translator of the message from your body. I speak the body's language. I know what it's trying to say with this situation that's going on.
Yeah.
And sometimes it gets so literal. Like there was a person I worked with who was having this experience where if she ate the wrong foods, and it happened frequently, her body would get really bloated. And like one of the complaints was people would be like, "Are you pregnant?" You know, they would actually think or say that to her. And we explore the issues going on, and there was a situation of like regret over not being able to have more children and wishing she could get pregnant again was like a deep psychological issue and subconscious thing that she was struggling to let go of. And so, you know, the body's language was like, you want to be pregnant. So you are hurt and holding on to hurt over wishing you could be pregnant when you pass the age for it. So we'll just pretend to be pregnant. The body was just literally acting out the regret issue. You know, it's so sometimes it's so like
fascinating,
right under their nose, and they you know, but it's hard to see those things. They're too close, you know.
Yeah, I have that experience with this plantar wart on my right foot, on my big toe, on the bottom, and I associate that with sort of this hesitation or fear of stepping forward into I think my higher self or my destined path. There's some fear around some of that stuff. I'm obviously not opposed to just jumping into stuff feet first as well. So maybe there's a little bit of, I don't know, injury from that. I don't know, but it's like, there's definitely something there because I have more that I want to go into, but I'm like, I feel a little bit of hesitation.
The feet are really interesting because they, on one hand, it's like, there's the basic symbolism in the biofield of the feet of the path you're on, right foot, the path you've come from, left foot, and your trust in those things, if you will, or acceptance of those things. But then, you know, in my opinion, the feet are, and the hands too, are like a fractal of the body. So when someone's having issues with the feet, I recommend looking at those like reflexology charts of the foot. What is the exact pinpoint location of the issue in the foot, and what part of the body does that map to? And one thing that I really like with the weighted tuning fork, the sonic slider that Eileen sells, it's for organ situations like, say you have lung issues or something internal and it's hard to reach with a physical like massage or, you know, weighted tuning fork on the body. Find the reflexology spot on the foot that corresponds to the lungs or to the kidneys or whatever, and put the fork there. It's actually pretty amazing. Like you put that on the, or even just massage it, but you put the weighted tuning fork and vibrate the lungs spot on your foot and like pay attention to how well you breathe before and after. And it's like, oh, I can take a deeper breath right now. And I just vibrated a spot on my foot for 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's so
cool.
interesting. Yeah, and I've got to say, that's one thing I do love. Like, I'll never forget, it was one of the first interviews I think or like one of the first episodes of your podcast I listened to, where you were talking about, actually it would have been on the podcast with Isaac. I think it was the first full interview I listened to of yours. And you were talking about an accident you'd had like with your ankle, and then you were talking about like what it corresponded to. And this is where I love like again, this is why I like learning all these different things, because the one thing with German new medicine, they say that like injuries and accidents don't apply with German new medicine, which I don't fully agree with, because again, I think there's something on the metaphysical.
I didn't know that they said that, and I would be like,
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah, and I'm with you.
Huge.
Absolutely, and I'm with you, because I think, again, it's like subconsciously. So, for example, an accident, you might fall off a ladder, but why would you? Some people are going to fall on the left side and some people are going to fall on the right side. And I do think that there's an unconscious, like, for whatever reason, you're going to go to one side or the other. And it's so interesting listening like to your story from, years ago about with your ankle. It was just like a second thing that happened, but you were just like, but then I looked at what ankle it happened to, and it totally corresponded with what was going on in my life at that point. So I love that nuance, because I totally believe in that. And I'd love if you could speak a little more to that and like your view on that when we have these so-called accidents or injuries that we don't consciously. Yeah.
Even go bigger than just thinking about the biofield ramifications, especially with injury. Think about the circumstances of what's going on, especially with recurring patterns, if you're able to notice them. One of the things that getting tuned can really help with is finding out the recurring pattern that you're missing, you're not realizing is a recurring pattern. Because as with the value of what examining like injuries and mishaps or misfortunes beyond just the physical ramification of how you got hurt, what does it symbolically mean to fall off a ladder? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Because it's symptoms themselves are symbols, right? Like the bloating, that woman was a symbol of her regret about not being able to get pregnant, her wish to get pregnant again. Honestly, it's like back to frustration. It's a frustration energy because the stomach is governed by the sacral energy, just like the sexual organs are. There's a dual system there. Very interesting, actually. So think about the symptoms on a symbolic level and even sometimes kind of abstractly. And that is part of what I think bring to the table as a tuner in helping people see patterns in their life, because sometimes those patterns are more symbolic, where they're not realizing a certain thing is happening over and over again because it may take different forms in a way, but like the underlying theme of the pattern is there. So yeah, try the best way I could describe it is if you are familiar with a Jungian dream interpretation, it doesn't need to be Jungian. There doesn't need to be a specific system to it, right? But we've all had a dream where we realized, oh, I wasn't just naked in school because I'm just stressed out. Like it was about this situation, and that dream meant this thing that's going on in my life. It's just showing up in the dream differently, right? We're processing things, right? Treat your they say to have a dream journal, right? But what if you had a journal of your daily experiences, but that you wrote the way that you would a dream journal, as in interpreting the events of your life the way you would dream symbols? And there's a real value to that. That was huge when I realized you could do that. And I don't do a journal per se, but I do think about what's going on in my life. I've just become accustomed to thinking about things on the meaning symbolically behind events, going on, and it's huge.
Yeah.
Oh,
there's so much there.
Just realized the time. We're getting a little late.
Yeah. We definitely need to
Can I tell a quick story?
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
I do need to start leaving. There was a story I wanted to tell on this podcast. I've told it maybe a couple other places, but the Bertaria Festival this year was great because I got to be a speaker this time, and that was really fun.
Yes.
And right before I spoke at the event, this story that I'm about to tell happened. And it was really interesting because we're talking about how much, belief is a factor and different systems resonate with you and they'll be more effective for you. But I had an experience where tuning worked for somebody that had no business, with it working, if you need to believe in it or understand it for it to work. So my dad's first cousin was visiting from out of town. He's somebody that I only kind of know. I see him every couple of years for a couple of hours at like family reunions. I've known him for a long time, but rarely see him or interact with him, so I don't know him well. But as long as I've known him, he's had debilitating like disability, can't work, crippling back pain. And while he was visiting my parents, he was extra stressed out because there was some stuff going on with his mom in the hospital or whatnot, and that's what he was in our town for. And I came over to visit him and see my parents that night. I brought my big tuning fork. I wasn't sure if I was going to try anything with him because this is a, hospital attending doctor believer. Luckily, even though they prescribed him the opioids for his pain, he was on them and then realized they were going to kill him and got off. So he's just been coping with pain and doesn't really have a way to manage it. So that's the setup. I'm about to leave. He's clearly hurting a lot and stressed out. And I was like, just stand here, right here in the living room. Just stand here for a minute. Give me 5 minutes. I just want to check you out with my fork. I start scanning hit the big fork, going up and down. I'm like, okay, I get the cue, pinpoint. This is the spot in the back where the pain is coming from. So I ask, is the source of the pain on your right side in the middle, like solar plexus level on the right? And I kind of point at that spot. And he's like, yes, that's where it comes from. It radiates down into my legs and it makes it hard for me to stand and walk. I'm like, okay. So that's a clue right there that it's like, okay, it's related to a support issue because your legs are your support if it's radiating all the way down to the legs. But more importantly, I know that spot, back right solar plexus, has to do with feeling unsupported or unloved by your father. That's the biofield anatomy explanation. So, okay, I know that that's the spot. So I've got the vertical coordinates, time to find the horizontal. So I start sweeping from, away from his body towards his body until I find the snag, and it's about 3 feet and an inch or two away from his body. I have the advantage of being able to have about a 6 foot wingspan when I spread my arms out, so I can kind of use my body as the yardstick when I need to, when I'm in the field. So I asked him, how old are you? 55. Okay, so this spot just a little bit over 3 feet away. Because I didn't even mention this, but the biofield, your energy field is a chronology to it. So like your field is 6 feet. The edge of your field is when you're born. At your body is current time. 3 feet away is the age of 25. It's like the rings of a tree, to put it simply and be quick. So I could tell, and I did the math, this is about the age of 26. So I just say to him, tell me about the feeling, or tell me about what comes to mind when I mention being like estranged from your father or feeling unsupported by your father when you were 26. And he goes, what doesn't come to mind about that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't even know your dad. I didn't know his father's name even. I'd never met him before. And my father was actually watching this happen. And he's like, did I tell you about this? And I'm like, I have no idea about whatever this is. I'm just telling you what's in his energy field. And anyway, the story comes out that at that exact age, the age of 26, his dad had stolen from him, and they had a falling out, and they didn't talk anymore. Wow. And now his father's passed away, and it had all these other ramifications like secret gay stuff. And anyway, wow. I don't know. I hope that's not true, but there is implications made. It was like heavy duty and painful. It sounded like painful stuff. And I was like, look, man, your physical pain in your back is at least somewhat, if not almost entirely, unresolved, unacknowledged emotional pain about this situation with your father back then. And he's like, I started having my back problems in my late 20s. Wow. And I've had them ever since. And I'm like, yeah. Yep. And this all happened in the span of 5 minutes. And he looks at me and he's like, it doesn't hurt anymore.
No way.
And I was like, good. Wow. And he's like, man, it was burning. It's burning pain. It was so bad. I was about to go to bed before 7 because I couldn't do anything anymore. I was like, as soon as you left, I was going to go to bed, but it doesn't hurt anymore. The burning is gone.
That says so much about just the acknowledgement of the emotional pain,
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And just as
sometimes that's all it takes, and it's not always that miraculous, but sometimes that can happen where you just put 2 and 2 together and you just acknowledge that's why it hurts. And I don't know what kind of integrative process it was for him after that, because he went back to Kansas City, where he's from. I did receive updates through my dad because he was texting my dad and he's like, my back is fixed. It doesn't hurt anymore. It still doesn't hurt.
That's awesome.
It's incredible.
It was cool. So then I had that story I could tell at Bertaria Fest a couple of days later, and I thought that was a real blessing because it's such a powerful story. And, you know, tuning in terms of results, there's no guarantees, I say.
Yeah.
But the potential ranges from incredible miracle like that to just a subtle boost in energy. But don't discount the subtle boost in energy because it's cumulative. What you could do with 5%, even 3% more energy every day, that adds up. That's a lot in the bank. You know, think about it. If you just need the metaphor of money, like what if 3% of your income or 5% of your income was you added 5% income and you didn't touch it and it just went into savings and you know, like over time, what would that be? Quite a lot, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the spectrum of what tuning can be. A little bit of subtle boosts, hard to quantify, but definitely helped feeling more in flow versus like we finally figured out why this chronic problem is going on and I can move on from that chronic problem because I got the message. It was a message from my body. My body was not broken. It's trying to tell me something.
Yeah.
I share that same thing. Pain is not the enemy. It's there as a signal. So this is an amazing way to learn to listen to that signal and to pry into it curiously without taking a needle, smoking up some dope and going under and being on a surgical plane and then having your body cut it. Like you could avoid surgery, but you know, you got to do it what's right for you. If you feel drawn to it, definitely go and check out Chance, get a hold of him, share where we can
check out my website because on the page where people can buy tunings, I have a lot of free information, including the basics of the biofield anatomy, what things go where in the body and on the field. And it's important to me more. I really want to help people by giving them sessions. And that also supports me and my family. Not going to lie. Like I want you to come get a session with me, but it's more important to me that humanity kind of reclaims the birthright of being able to know what their body's telling them. So I put a lot of information for free on that page. So if you're curious, go check it out. You can consider getting a tuning. I'd love that. Let's work together. And if not, there's free stuff there. You can learn about your biofield anatomy. And if the system resonates with you the way that it did with me, you know, even if it's just something that you learn about for your own interpretation of what goes on in your life with your health, or even better, like, you know, for your children, right? Like another quick story. I know I'm trying to wrap us up, but it's just like fun. I'm feeling it. But when my daughter was born, she had this serious tongue tie that was connecting the tip of her tongue to the bottom of her mouth, causing it to be difficult to nurse. And you know, by 1 month old, we did a procedure with like a very conscious dentist who had like this fancy laser that barely does any damage, and we cut the tongue tie. And that was interesting because the tongue tie cut aligned exactly with this big, significant astrological transit. Oh, wow. Particularly significant to her chart. I don't want to go into the details. I've talked about it elsewhere, but it was like the right thing to do. But the first month of nursing being difficult was very frustrating to the newborn, right? And so when we have frustration build up in our system, it affects our digestion and it can create constipation. That's one of the possible outcomes. And I know this from tuning people. So we're witnessing, even after the tongue tie was cut, that she was having, you know, getting blocked, pooping a little bit, like clearly uncomfortable with it. So we started using the tuning fork on the left side of her stomach, right in that area. And we were doing it as an emergency, you know, triage, like help her get this poop out. And then we switched strategies. Instead of waiting for there to be a problem and trying to fix it with the fork, we started using it every time we changed her diaper, just one hit. So just a few seconds. And this is back to the cumulative thing that I was talking about, how it adds up. And not only did that clear the backlog of frustration and stop the problem from ever coming back, it really taught me about how we ought to consider using these tools in a, you know, as just a part of our lifestyle. Like put it in your bathroom and use it after you wash your hands, or, you know, put it somewhere where it's like it's more effective to do a little bit often than try to do a lot when it hurts.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lesson about life in general, like, and about procrastination and ankle stuff, to kind of bring it all around, bring it all home. Right. Little steps. And this is, you know, little steps consistently gets you a lot farther than irregular giant steps. So
yeah, so true.
I'm out.
So
I'm
true.
out of stuff to talk about.
Awesome.
That's perfect.
Thank you so much, Chance. That's brilliant, and I can attest to your skill with this. So definitely go check it out.
Yeah, we'll have
Thanks
all your
for
links
coming on
in the show
show.
notes.
Give our best to your wife, and we just send blessings and love to little Grace, and look forward to the next time we can have you on.
I was going to say, we'll have to do this like regularly. We'll have to have you on at least once a year, because you just always have so much gravy. You're just ladling gravy like left, right, and center. There's just it's always so many places we can go.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff. You know, if you check out some of my more specific content, I'm always down to talk about something prepared too. But this, you know, my feeling of being in a flow state in a conversation is really connected to the quality of witness of who I'm talking to. So I just want to thank you guys. I feel like I really flowed effectively and satisfactorily here, at least for me. I enjoyed myself a lot.
Yeah.
And we talked about all the things I'd like to talk about, and somehow it all just kind of worked. So that says a lot about you guys being great hosts, and it was fun to talk to you, and I look forward to the next time, and thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in to the Natural AF podcast, where we explore holistic healing modalities, mindsets, and methods that reconnect us to nature and our natural state of being.
If something resonated, share this episode and see the show notes for our guest links, as well as all of our discount codes for our aligned affiliates and natural art form, where we handcraft a range of organic, natural remedies to help support your body's natural healing abilities and help support the show.
If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please take a few seconds to leave us a rating and review. And if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, hit the like button and drop us a comment, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for the latest updates.
We're not here to conform. We're here to remember what's real. So step into your power, be curious, and be natural AF.